We got it.
We're here.
Here we are. This is the Herpetoculture podcast, episode 230. Brought to you by BlackBoxCages.com. You need a rack. You need a cage. BlackBox cages are all the rage. Whether you're in the market for something large, something on the smaller side, rack-wise, you need something with more space, something that's a little more compact. Whether you love racks or you hate racks or you love cages or you hate cages, it doesn't matter. They've got something for pretty much everyone, and a model that's likely to fit your needs. So
They've done a very good job at pretty much fulfilling all sizes you could imagine between racks and cages. The only thing they really haven't done in racks is arboreal stuff, but I think they're working towards those eventually. But tall cages, short cages, big racks, small racks. Yeah, they got. If you're looking for anything PVC, they've got something that'll absolutely fit your needs, and you definitely need to check them out. We need to get an update on the discount code, but I believe for now it's still THN24, right?
I think so, yes.
For now, that might get updated, but use that code.
Give THN24, try THN25.
Yeah. Get 5% off your order and help you out with some shipping, man. Or there's also a pickup option if you're in the general Southeast area, you feel like making a drive and dealing with Atlanta. You can absolutely do that. Save a little bit off the top.
They're not like in Atlanta proper. You're not having to deal with like the crazy 8 lanes of hell.
No.
Straight through the middle of downtown Atlanta. You don't have to deal with any of that. They're in I never can tell if it's Buford or Bufford.
I think it's Buford.
I don't. It's always going to depend on who you ask.
But I'm pretty sure it's
from there or not. It's like here. You know, how many people come in and say, "Oh, yeah. I've never been to Beaufort." And it's like
Beaufort,
wrong state, buddy.
Yeah, no. But yeah, it ain't too bad. I think this last time we went was definitely the most miserable drive. But I think we timed it horribly. I think we got into like outside Atlanta area at like 3:00, and it was horrible. So that sucked. But it's absolutely drivable, especially if you're in the Georgia area. But definitely check them out. You won't be disappointed. Best of the best PVC caging and racks in the biz.
Right. Current lead time, I believe, is somewhere between 6 to 7 weeks. They update that on their website regularly. It's right at the very top of the homepage. So when you go to blackboxcages.com, you want to know what their current lead time is. They are very good about staying on top of that and keeping that current. So instead of, I guess, having to answer a bunch of emails and messages and stuff all the time, they just have it there and accurate so that people can just pop right on there and find it in 10 seconds. So, but after what you got?
Yes. So I was just pulling up the website. Current lead time is approximately 6 to 7 weeks, depending on order size and customization. Holidays not included. And it will be updated. Oh, it was updated February 17th. So they just updated a couple days ago. So if you're looking at 6 to 7 weeks, which is still a great lead time as they have grown and gotten more popular. It used to be like you'd have your rack in like 3 weeks, but they've gotten more and more business. So lead times are getting out there, but still better than other sources that will remain unnamed. You will get your cage before your snake outgrows it.
Yes. But after you're done shopping for that cage, you say, hey, I need a shirt. I need a hat. I need a coffee mug. FullFaceApparel.com. Jason's got it right there. He's got that Imperator shirt. Jake's, I'll say Jake hasn't taken that off since flipping tin last week.
I just washed it and I needed a snake shirt tonight, and I was like, man, I'm just gonna throw this on. I knew you were gonna say something because I wore it on flipping tin last week.
I mean, if you like it that much, buddy, I'm just glad you're happy.
I do. I've been hounding you for this shirt for like 3 months.
2 weeks, not even.
Dude, I asked you for this thing months ago. Please.
Well, shop around FullFaceApparel.com. Fulvius Apparel on Facebook and Instagram, and then use the code THN at checkout. Get 15% off your order. That is the exclusive promo code for THN listeners and viewers like you. just released another Rhino Rat shirt, another Poecilotheria shirt, which I think is like the third or fourth one that I've put up. People are probably tired of seeing them. What is that? From what? That's mom's. Take it back.
Dad life.
Yeah, she's trying to give me like a whole handful of change. Like, what do you want me to do with that in this very moment? Like, that's
not noisy on a microphone either.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
So, Steve Snaketuary, his Venom Hot Sauce, also awesome dude doing awesome things. We suggest the Cottonmouth sauce, but if you're feeling generous and adventurous, get the whole set. Try them all. SteveSnaketuary.com. By getting those hot sauces, you are helping Steve directly with his public outreach. He does a lot of public education stuff, a lot of talks, goes to a lot of schools, converts the nation's youth to become like us, and he's also a first responder. So that's not an easy job. He's doing a lot of work all the time. I can't imagine he has a ton of downtime. So help boy out. Get all them hot sauces, collect them all, get the whole set.
Yes, sir.
Cottonmouth sauce is where it's at.
That's where it's at. That's like, I feel like the only thing with the Cottonmouth sauce, I feel like it is a specific sauce. Like we always say it would be good with like tacos or like chips and stuff like that. But like it's a very good sauce. It's a green hot sauce. As the kids would say, it smacks.
Yeah.
At least I think that's what they say. I don't know anymore.
I can't keep up with it anymore. I don't know.
No.
I'm getting to that point.
It's getting weirder and weirder. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
Mine's in the 6th grade, and some of the lingo they're using now, I'm like, I don't. What, like, where does this even come from? Where do you guys come up with this crap? Like,
dude, it's getting so bad. Like, you know, when we were young, like, you know, we said dumb stuff, but like, I feel like this is reaching a new level of stupidity that's just absurd. But
it's weird.
Yeah,
it's TikTok generation. I don't know, man.
yeah. But that's neither here nor there. What's going on, buddy?
It's cold again.
It is cold again, and I'm kind of thankful because I don't have to pull stuff out of cooling yet.
I was gonna say we had that like week of 80-degree weather, and I'm like,
I held out.
Jake's pulling his stuff out, and then like the following week, it was like, nope, back into the 40s and 30s.
I was holding out, and that's exactly why I do it. Like when it starts to warm up, if it's warm for like 2 weeks consecutively, that's when I'll pull them because I let the whole like gradual warm up thing that people do.
They call that this week of warm weather, I think, false spring.
Yeah, I let my garage do that gradual warm up thing by itself. Like I'm not trying to like keep them in my living room at 70 degrees, blah blah. No, I let my garage do the work for me. When it's consecutively warm for like 2 weeks, that's when I'll pull them and directly back into the snake room because I don't have to worry about that transitional period. They've already done that in the garage, warmed up, bada bing, bada boom.
I just feel bad for them because it's it gets warm for a couple days and they're like, oh sweet, it's that time, and so they come out and start doing their thing, and then all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from under them again, and they're like, oh shit.
It's got to be confusing.
It's got to be.
But that's why I like the garage because it's a natural thing. Like, that's what snakes are going to experience around here at least. And all my stuff is southeastern colubrids. So it's a natural fluctuation that they're going to experience. And I don't mind it. I'm not one of those guys that's like 55 degrees for 90 days exactly. And no, I let my garage do the work for me as long as it doesn't get too cold. If it gets into if it gets below like 40s in the garage, hell, even mid 30s, I'll turn a heater on in there just to kind of get it up a little bit. But
yeah, just to keep it from falling below a certain point.
Yeah. As long as it doesn't dip below freezing, I let it ride, which is very hard for the garage because it's pretty well insulated. So,
yeah,
that's good.
Anything new to report?
Well, I told y'all before, or I told you before we started the show. I just found one of my eastern milk snakes dead. So super, super awesome there. I am not happy about it. Don't really know why. Animals, I had to be something internal because I got this pair at Daytona. It's Ashe County Eastern Milks. And out of nowhere, the male just got like really skinny. And I was feeding them just like the female, but the female was keeping weight a lot better. So I was like, this is weird. Maybe I just need him with some more food. He went in the shed, had a bad shed, and then I fed him last week and he was dead today. So not really sure what happened with that. My only guess is something internal because the female looks phenomenal, has weight, looks nice and plump, no issues, perfect sheds. So I can only guess it was something internal, so that super sucks. But yeah, that's my only update as of today.
You weren't even wearing your cup, were you?
No, it was a real good way to go into the podcast.
Kick off Thursday.
Yeah, it was super sick. So that sucks, but such is life. We move on. And one thing I do want to throw out here that's off of that topic. I have a yellow rat snake, Seminole County yellow, that was born pretty kinked, but not like kinked sideways kinked. It's got like raises in the spine type of kinks,
like vertical kinks.
Yeah, it's weird. She's kind of as she's grown, they haven't become as pronounced. They've become a little bit more flat. Either way, I just want her in a good home. So if you do any educational stuff or you just want a pet and have no interest in breeding, she is going to be a pet only animal. I will send her to you. If we have to ship, just cover shipping. That would be all I ask. But I would just like her to go to a good loving home because she wants to live. You know, that's my thing with animals like that. If they're not doing well, then I will put them down. But she eats on her own, sheds on her own, poops on her own, and is completely fine otherwise.
She just got that Quasimodo action is going on as well.
Yeah, she's quiet. And she moves fine. She appears normal. It's just like when you feel it and you look at it, it was a lot more severe when she hatched, but it's not quite as noticeable now. But it's definitely there. It's definitely noticeable when you look. So if you need a snake for educational purposes, or you just want to pet, let me know. I've asked around a couple people and nobody seemed to be interested yet. So if that's something that tickles your fancy, let me know. I'll be happy to send her to you. Just cover shipping costs. So
how's Spurge? Speaking of pets,
I hate you so much, dude. He's fine, man. I mean, he's small because I don't feed the hell out of him. I've got him on small rats now. He's a psychopath, dude. I mean, he is nuts for food. I mean, after a week, he's cruising the cage constantly looking for food. I got to watch my fingers or my hands when I go in there because he'll be out at the top of the lid waiting for something. Anybody who doesn't know, Spurge, or Spurge, short for Spurgeon, is my ball python that Smitty graciously gifted.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Man, that was 2018.
I think so, dude.
You gave him to me. It's been a while. It was like 2018, 2019.
One of the meanest things I've ever done.
Yeah, I
regret it. If it makes you feel any better,
I honestly shouldn't have taken him and made you deal with that for the rest of your life. But yeah, he's chilling, man. I mean, he's happy, healthy, and fat, and likes to tip over his water dish every week. But he's chilling. Yeah, it's so funny. Kayla she said something about snakes she asked me if I would want a ball python from somebody. I was giving one away, and I was like, no, I don't. I was like, I already have a ball python. She's like, you don't have a ball python? I was like, Yeah, I do. She's like, you've never told me you have that, blah blah blah,
So
and I'm
don't
like,
claim him as my
it
own.
doesn't
Just
really come up, but he's there. Sure as shit, eating a frozen thawed rat every couple weeks. But yeah, he's growing. He had a little bit of a growth spurt since switching him on the small rats, but
yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
he's chilling. No thanks to you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, appreciate it. How are things at your end, buddy?
Nothing too exciting. Just sort of mentally getting ready for rhino season. Got a couple going out here soon. I do still have, say, like 2 males that are ready to go.
Rhinos?
Yeah, and I still have 2. I don't even know. I don't remember what the sexes are on them, but I have 2 of them that are still fighting me on taking pinkies. So those aren't available yet. They may be within the next couple weeks, hopefully. Been kind of taking my time with those. But my guppy project has been struggling. I have 3 fry still, and the lone male Benjamin Shanklin still hanging out and doing his thing, and then some shrimp are still in there, but everyone else is gone. So
Did you just say Benjamin Shanklin?
yeah, his name's Benjamin Shanklin. He's the ruler of the roost, man.
Okay.
He's the male guppy that's just in there and doing his thing. He's outcompeted everyone else. He's the lone survivor minus the babies.
Have you checked the water temp in there since it's in the
I have
garage?
a heater in there.
Yeah, but when it's 30 degrees outside, I'm sure
I have
it's
a
not.
thermometer and stuff. Like I've been keeping an eye on it.
Well, that's why I'm curious. What's the water temperature at?
Doing fine. I don't know what it is at the moment. I know it's not cold. It's not whatever it is outside.
Well, yeah, I know that, but I'm just curious.
I need to talk to Dustin Black because he told me to wait a couple weeks before I got any more females, and so now I'm wondering if it's been long enough and if I can get some more. But so far, the track record is I buy some females, I put them in there, they do great for a couple days, and then they just die off. And I've repeated that at least twice now. So
that's how it goes with fish.
I've got time to get it all dialed in and figured out.
You should probably do a water test.
Maybe. I don't like the pH and stuff.
pH, alkaline, all kinds of stuff you can test for just to see where it's at.
It's weird because the male that I have in there now, the other males were doing fine too, and that male's been doing great. It's just been females that have been struggling. So I would think if it were like a larger issue, then I would be losing all of them. You know?
Yeah.
But other than that, that's pretty much it. Finally got my hands on chicken hearts. If you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you've known that I've been on the hunt for chicken hearts locally for a long time, and finally the grocery store that we frequent started carrying those. And what else? There was something else they were carrying that was like a kind of an off the wall organ meat that we don't typically see. But either way, got some of those. Most of the rhinos took them, which is kind of surprising because I've tried gizzards and some other stuff in the past and they wouldn't touch them.
Like adults or babies?
Adults. I didn't try any with any of the babies with this last round, but I bought 2 packs and I have one in the freezer that I'm going to bust out this weekend. But it's a great option, great alternative. Not a full alternative to mice, but to sort of in between feedings, change things up a little bit, get a little bit of variety in there.
It's a treat.
They're the perfect size for, adult rhinos, corns, bears, rats, stuff like that. They're a good size without being huge. There is a little bit of fat on them, so that's kind of nice to get a little bit of that, but it's mostly going to be straight muscle and protein. And pretty much everything will take them at this point. I have a couple corns that are oddly weirded out by them, but everything else seems to be pretty cool with it. So,
Man, speaking of corns, I cannot wait till these ladies' islands are ready to go. I love those snakes. They're
my
so
dad,
nice.
he has one that I gave him. That's we don't know if it's a male or female. We never sexed it, but I think he wants to breed that, but it's also ridiculously obese because he feeds the snot out of his stuff.
Jesus.
So I'm like, if it's a female, I'm concerned that she's not gonna do great with that because of just how much weight she has on her. But we'll see. Maybe.
Dude, my female from you is so red, man. She looks so good. She's really nice, and that male's got the real mahogany look to him. That male, honestly, that male Ladies Island from you is one of the best snakes in my collection as far as like snakes I'll pull out for somebody. Like he's very food oriented, but as soon as I pull him out, he's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't run a lot. He's a very calm individual, and being an F1, that really surprised me.
Yeah, most of the ones that I have that are F1s were not super mellow. Most of them were.
Oh no, my female's a dick. Like my female is not calm at all. Like she barely tongue feeds now, but the male super chill. He's getting some size on him. He could probably breed. The female's a year behind him, so she needs another year or two. But yeah, they're awesome, man. And those Charleston counties I got from Gabe, dude, you need to come over and see those.
I do.
Those are really nice.
But yeah, that's there's really nothing new going on over here or anything too exciting. So this week, I feel like we haven't had a boa episode in a really long time, like a dedicated boa episode. So since like early December, we've had to reschedule a handful of times, but I'm glad we're finally making it happen. But this episode, we're joined by Jason Miloradovich. To talk about boas because that's the bulk of what he's got. Yeah, ready to dive into it. What's going on, dude?
What's up? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Glad to finally get you on. I feel like we've been planning this for the last 2 months.
Yeah, it's hard juggling schedules sometimes.
No, dude, it's all good.
Especially kids and, school stuff and wrestling and band and
fortunately,
doing good. We listen to you guys talk about your temperatures. I'm a little jealous. 30s and 40s would be nice.
Where are you at?
I'm in northern Colorado, and it's been pretty cold here lately.
Oh, I was expecting you to be like, oh yeah, I can't keep my temps down. I'm in Florida. But
no, today was warmer than it has been, and I think we got up to like 22 or something like that.
Jesus Christ.
It was -8 when I left for work the other day, and it's brutal. Yeah.
So you got to tell me, like, when you get into negative temperatures like that, can you really tell a difference between like -8 and -23? Or does it just feel the same?
I don't know if I've ever got down to -23. I know I've done negative teens, and it hurts. It's like one of those things where like your fingertips they burn, when you're outside in the cold like that.
I just figure it's got to get to a point where it could be -80 and you wouldn't know it versus -15 or 20. Like the cold is just, your body can't decipher how cold it is past a certain point. It
just knows you need to be back inside.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, it was 30 below zero the day I was born.
Wow. Where was that?
Wisconsin.
Hell froze over.
Yeah, I was born in Wisconsin in January, late January at that.
Wow.
And my grandmother complained about it to the day she died. You chose the worst day to come, blah, blah, blah. It was like freeze. It was almost freeze your lungs cold when I was born.
Yeah, that's painful.
Jesus.
So you were talking about brumation and what you got in your garage and stuff. I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but our winters have kind of shifted here. Mm-hmm. Where it used to be, I guess it just feels like our winters are starting later. And even being in a basement, it's like the animals are picking up on that. So my seasons have kind of shifted with that. and I kind of quit fighting it. I start brumating my rosy boas and rubber boas and black Russian sand boas primarily what I brumate. So I just kind of let them go with the weather now. So my where I used to wake them up, by February, usually by Valentine's Day is what I shoot for. They're still being cooled right now. Just, I mean, if it's this cold outside, let them have it, right?
That's exactly how I look at it. Like for me, being in the Southeast, our winters are short, and I don't have a fridge that I can put stuff in for a dedicated amount of time. So my stuff really doesn't go down till very late December, if not beginning of January. And I just kind of keep it down until the weather tells me to pull them. Yeah, I'm getting eggs and babies later than everybody else, but
But I tried to get my rosies back on track, and so one year I kind of forced them into the brumation with the times I used to do, which I did the whole, you start the cooling on Thanksgiving, you wake them up on Valentine's Day, and you pair them on April Fool's Day, right? And it's funny because so I gave everybody a year off because I was actually getting rosy boas in like November the year before, and which is just crazy late. So I gave everybody the year off, and I tried to force that. And even waking them up early, they still didn't breed till later. So it's like they're still picking up on that.
And I think it is like, because some colubrids, like it's more of like, doesn't really matter when you pull them or when you put them down. It's the time of year and the barometric pressures that they feel that triggers all of that. So yeah,
it's so all bit of everything. Yeah,
right. So all the whole cooling period, when you put them down, when you pull them, may not matter as much as we think. Like southern pines, like this year, my albino pines, even though she slugged out, she didn't give me eggs till September, and then
a while.
And then looking into it, a lot of people say like they're late breeders. Like, I don't know, my gopher snakes, my rat snakes, my first clutches were laid like 2 months before I think I had babies hatched from my rat snakes before I ever got my albino pine eggs. So it's just weird, man. Like each species.
Do you brumate the babies?
No, I don't brumate. I will brumate stuff like I'll brumate yearlings or 2-year-olds just to get them on a cycle if I have the means to do it. But like right out the gate, no, I don't really. Unless I have to. If something's not eating, then I'll throw it in for a month and see if that triggers anything. But I haven't had to do that yet. But I'm certainly not afraid to. Eventually, one day when I have things my way and I have a dedicated colubrid room and a python room, I will though, because I'll just cool the whole room and everything will stay in there and everything will be on the same size cycle, and that'll be that. Because I'm not one of those people that like I only cool down during like if it's breeding. Like I'm one of those people that like if I start cooling it down, I'm going to cool it down every year. Like whether it's going to breed or not breed. Some people don't cool down unless they're breeding. That's a personal thing. But
I guess I look at it like if they do it in nature, why wouldn't I do it? Exactly. At this point, I think it probably extends their longevity to give them those natural cycles. I think the fasting period that we associate is associated with the brumation really helps them convert some of those fat stores into muscle mass, and I think it just helps them long term.
Yeah, and I think it keeps them on a schedule. Like I don't know, and I'm not talking bad about anybody that does the only cool them when they're breeding thing, but like
no, for me, their own.
Yeah, for me, it keeps them on a natural cycle. It's like why would I cool them 2 years in a row, but not 1 year, or cool them 1 year, not for 2 years? I'm like, it's not natural to me. It's like these things are getting cooled every year in the wild. They have a winter. Winter doesn't just go away because they're not going to breed that year. So that's just me and the way I think about it,
Right.
But
I have I do some of my babies now where I've just started to cool them, like mainly rubber boas and then the Russian sand boas. Like when those are born, they just get cooled, and a lot of times that triggers a much better feeder.
Yeah,
once I warm them back up, I quit trying with the Russian sand boas. They
Right.
just, yeah, I quit trying to feed them first. I know I used to. The ones that would eat, I'd leave them up. Now I just do the whole litter in one tub, and I do have a refrigerator for those things that get real cold. And then my rosy boas, which I shoot for about 55 with them, but I have basically, when I did my snake room in the basement, when I finished the basement, I made it like a big walk-in closet that those are in, but I have a bunch of pipes that I ducked in from the garage. They make these inline fans that you can hook up to different size ductwork. So it just pumps cold air in, and I have an outlet that shoots it back out just for like a passive exchange.
Yeah.
But in the garage, so I can use the air in the garage, or I have a tube that I hooked up where I can plug it in. That goes up to the attic, so it's pulling in fresh air like right out the attic vents. So it seems to work pretty well for those. But that way, it's nice not having to take everything out of the tubs they're in, you know, because I'm cooling right in where they live, you know.
Yeah, that's one thing I've started doing is if I'm going to cool something, I try and cool the whole rack rather than taking them out, putting them in something different. I'll just wheel the entire rack into the garage and just
so much easier.
Yeah, dude, because the whole having separate tubs and yada yada yada. Like, if you have to do that, it absolutely works. But for me, it's also like the change in environment can't be great for them either. So if I can cool them in the tub that they live in full time, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And even stuff without casters, I get those. You can get them at like Harbor Freight or even Walmart. They're just like wheels that people use in like a garage.
The furniture dollies.
Yeah. Like, it's just something flat. A V70 fits almost perfectly on top of one of those. So I just slide the whole rack onto one of them and wheel it out to the garage, and it works great. I haven't had any issues. So
I have been curious if having animals pairs, what you plan to pair together during brumation, I wonder if that would do anything, like to kind of get them used to each other, get them interested in breeding.
So a lot of people do that with pits.
Yeah, JT and Eric Westmoreland, I believe, cool down pairs together.
Pain Shab does it with his Pitchophis
Does
too.
he?
Yeah, at least some of them.
And it seems to be a trigger they need then.
It's one of those things that, like, I think some species benefit from it more, but I don't think it hurts a lot of people. Like, rat snake guys that cohab, yeah, I mean they're cohabbing, 2 to 4 animals all together. Rat snakes, they're pretty can do them either way. They'll breed whatever. But it seems like Pain Shab specifically seems to have had better results cooling down Janai specifically together. So I don't know.
Yeah,
but I don't think it hurts.
I've done all cool females together just because when you have, especially with corns and stuff and bears, like with all the stuff that I have, for the sake of space, and I don't have a 10-foot stack of tubs in the garage, I'll put females together and cool them down. Males I'll do individually just because they definitely seem to be a little more sensitive to another male being in the same tub. I've noticed. So
you're not doing pairs; you're just doing the entire group of females.
I'll do like 2 females per like 32 quart tub for cooling.
Okay.
Nothing crazy. And again, that's just for the sake of saving some space during that period.
I started doing my my rubber boas, like trying to figure out what the pairs that are going to go together, and I've been putting those together. Those go in the refrigerator, and so that's one I've been kind of just experimenting with to see if that helps at all, does anything.
Those ones seem like a weird one, man. Like, because you have to get them crazy cold, right?
Yeah. The first year I ever it's early 2000s, I guess, was the first year I ever brumated any. And I was blown away because I kept lightly dropping that temperature, lightly dropping it. And I didn't see them they were active trying to get out of the tub in the low 40s. Like I was shocked, In fact, I did have some get out of the tub at that time. They're in the refrigerator, luckily, but they were babies, but it was crazy. It's like, it's 42 degrees. How do you have the strength to move around, But it's just, I don't know. They're neat little snakes. There's something special about rubber boas.
I've never kept them. They've piqued my interest, especially within the last couple of years of hearing people talk about them that are keeping them.
Yeah.
I want rubber boas bad.
As a kid, it was always like, oh, it's a brown snake, like whoop-de-doo. But now, as I get older, I'm coming to appreciate why they're so cool and just the ecology of them and things.
I think as we get older, when we're young, it's all about the flashy colors and the looks, and we start really appreciating the natural history of the things that really make them different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, rubber boas look fairly similar throughout their range, but my goal, I would love to start collecting ones that have provenance to very specific areas and keep those pairs separate from the rest. Because I think a lot of breeders right now with rubber boas are trying to breed. You got a rubber boa, you breed it to a rubber boa.
Right.
But if you think about their ranges, a lot of these are pretty isolated populations. Like they, south to north, they got a pretty wide range, and then they go, from the West Coast, they go inland a little bit, but they're at high altitudes, so they're really kind of separated. They can't go down and mix with these other populations.
Right.
So like the stuff in the San Bernardino Mountains, that's about as far south as they go. And you're talking, I think, what is that, like an hour and a half from Mexico, which you think is pretty warm, but they're at such a high altitude that they're getting those cooling temperatures they need, but they're never going to mix with another population. So how long until those turn into like island locality boas where we're starting to see differences? And
Right.
I think because they look the same, we're not going to physically see it, but I don't know. That's kind of a weird thing I'd like to do. So I have some that I know pretty specifically where the founder animals came from, and I'd like to dive into that more if I can. It's, they're hard to find. So it's, it's hard to find captive bred ones. So I don't know how easy that's going to be, but I think that would be a neat endeavor.
I don't know that I'll ever keep them just because I don't know how well they do given our area and, the humidity and the heat and things like that. But I don't know. Like I said, they're cool. Like seeing more people keep them now than I think I've ever seen. It's awesome that kind of thing is getting more traction, and people are sort of recognizing that natural history aspect of them and the ecology and stuff, and it piquing their interest enough to bring them into their rooms. And
right. It's a North American boa that's found active in light snow. Like how weird is that?
Yeah, dude.
It's just
they're so neat though. I don't know what it is about their body structure and their stupid looking little faces, but man, they're so cool. And I want them, but I think I would have to get it pretty specific to keep them here, being such a warmer climate. I definitely have to get a fridge
for cooling. But I mean, in the summertime, mine get fairly warm.
Yeah.
I mean, I've kept them in my main. I've kept some in my main snake room that's like getting, so the ambience in there are probably low 80s during the summertime, and they do okay. And the humidity, they seem to like humidity. I mean, they're often found, they're burrowed down where it is going to be a little wetter, and they're found, near streams and things like that. So
yeah.
And do they eat and everything fine when they're in that warmer?
Yeah, they do great. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. Well, I mean, let's jump into, what I guess tell us, as much or as little as you want about how you got into this and, where you're at today.
Why Boas?
So, I've asked myself that question, and I've wondered that because it really seems sometimes you get people that are very, I mean, I consider myself having a pretty diverse collection, but it is obviously very boa heavy. And I don't know what makes one person go that direction versus some guys are really into different types of pythons. And my first snake was a boa, so I don't know if it was kind of that took me down a rabbit hole. Excuse me. My first interaction that I can remember with a snake was holding a Burmese python. So I grew up in Northern California, and Marine World was in the town we lived in. And, they had one of those guys bring out the big boa and ask for volunteers or the big Burmese and ask for people to help hold it. But I didn't. So I was like maybe 4 or 5 at that time. I didn't get a snake until I was 16. It took me a while to convince my mom and stepdad to let me have one.
I'm right there with you, brother.
Right. And so it was funny. So this was the mid 90s. Of course, there's no internet or anything. And where I worked was the parking lot was across the street from the local library. So after work, I would go over to the library and I'd get any snake books that I could find. My intention was that when I would broach this subject with them, I could counter any argument by all this knowledge I'd gained over these last couple months. I think I may have actually put a deposit on a pet store boa at that time, but anyway, it worked. I got a boa, and it was just, it was at that time called a red tail, but what we now know is common boa, Colombian boa type thing. So that was really my first snake, and it was, it was cool. I really enjoyed it. I built my own cage for it. I've built most of my cages, I suppose, since then. But doing that research at the library, I came across a rainbow boa. And something I'd never heard of, never seen. And I was just blown away by the pictures in this library book about these rainbow boas. So when I got that first boa, I'd also got a subscription to Reptiles magazine. And I don't know if you guys remember, they used to do the classified ads in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always read through those and see what everybody was selling. And I ended up calling Peter Cal Reptiles, and I ordered, my mom let me borrow a credit card. I paid her back, but I ordered 2 rainbow boas, and I drove to DIA and picked them up from Delta Dash because there was really no other way to get snakes to you at that time. And I was enamored with the rainbow boas. And so a couple months later, I ordered 2 more from him. And, so that's really, it was kind of, I guess, my founding with snakes was really those 5 boas that, the 1 Colombian and then the rainbows, and it's kind of been boas since then. I mean, after that, I guess that's all I kept. So this was 96. I got those rainbows. And then, once I turned 18 and moved out, then it was kind of no holds barred. I'm going to start adding other stuff. So Doomerals was the next thing I added. And then I'd got a couple more red tail boas or common boas. I got some Amazon tree boas at one point. I think that's the only thing that I've ever kept so far that I haven't bred, with the exception of some Calibars that I have right now, but those are pretty new for me, just the last couple of years. The Doomerals I did okay with. I raised them up and I bred them in the early 2000s. I don't really consider myself real. I don't think I did great with them. I wasn't super successful. I had probably about a 50% slug stillborn ratio out of 3 litters I had overall between the 2 pairs that I had, which I remember being told at the time that that's very normal for Doomerals, but I still feel like there was probably something I just didn't understand at the time, that kind of thing.
Right.
So from there, I guess I would have been early, like 2001, 2002 is when I started adding rosy boas. And my intention with those was I wanted to try to do something with a morph, because everything I'd bred at that point was I guess, let's see, only thing I'd bred was the common boas by then. Mm-hmm. And I never bought morphs, so they were very expensive, if you remember back then. So I wanted to prove to myself that I could breed before I started spending money on any type of morph. In hindsight, I wish I would have gotten morphs and started raising them up. But you never know. So I got the rosy boas, and those just, I thought I was getting them because I wanted to see the morphs, but again, that's just another species that I really, really got into and really liked. And that grew a lot. What's really fun about rosy boas is they have small litters. So, you're talking, I probably average only 4 or 5. I think my best litter ever was 8 babies, so they're small. So you can have a lot of variety in one year without being just flooded with babies to feed. Right. And so it's really kind of fun just doing these different localities or different morphs or whatever, getting a lot of them. You'd have 10 litters, but you're not going crazy. Like if you did 10 litters of like big boas or something, you'd have to have a room just for baby racks,
They're also not big snakes, like
not at all,
not as adults. And man, I don't mean to cut you off, but like rosy boas, I have such a love-hate relationship with rosy boas. I helped take care of one years ago. That's a whole other story. And that was the weirdest snake, man. Like it was so cool, but it was so dumb at the same time. It would do that thing to where you would hold it and it was totally chill. All of a sudden, like it would pick its nose up into your hand and you're like, don't do it. Don't do it. And that slow mouth open and then bite and constrict. I'm like, you asshole. Like, stop.
I had
most of them do that.
And they're so weird, just like with those little heads and those big bodies. And they're such a unique snake, in my opinion. Like they're so cool. And I keep wanting to get back into them, but
I appreciate them for what they are. I had one as a kid and that thing was a real ass.
Just food responsive?
No, it was just a prick. Like, it was not happy. It was just an unhappy snake. I don't know.
You rarely see them like actually. You rarely see them like actually like very defensive. They're normally just like kind of like hog noses. They're just like there's just like not a lot clicking up there. But like
I remember we went to the pet store.
Aggressive.
And I saw it, and I told my dad, I was like, I want to get that. And the people at the store were like, "This one's kind of, it's bitey, it's mean." And I was like, "I don't care, I want it." And then I just came to really resent that little worm.
There was a time I thought I could tame anything down, right? You learn your lesson with some animals. Yeah. They, I wouldn't say they're defensive, but they're aggressive in a food way. Like
Right.
it's almost like they'd rather bite and see if it's edible and just find out that way, which interestingly enough, I've been told that, wild caught ones are not prone to bite at all. And I've tried, but I've never found one in the wild. But I think that's really interesting why they would be this way in captivity, because they really are. I feel like the coastal stuff, maybe a little bit more than the desert stuff, but even then I still get some of them that'll do it. So yeah, I don't know what it is about them, but they're really cool snakes. And they're another one that I fell in love with for a very different reason. One trend you're probably seeing here that I've often wondered if kind of hurts my breeding success is like I've gone for stuff that's very different. So sometimes I think if I had a room that was all high humidity like the rainbow boas or very dry like the rosies, but at the same time, I think I'd be maybe a little bit more successful that way. But at the same time, it would be hard to. I like the variety,
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
doing different things and figuring different things out is really fun. With the rosy boas. I guess in the early 2000s, mid to mid 2000s, I started tracking their gestation periods. So I was watching for ovulations and then writing down their next shed. And they're surprisingly consistent. I always have babies. So it's like 104 days, 107, between 104 and 107 post ovulation and 84 to 87 post shed. And I bet any outliers on that I could count on one hand over the years. And it's weird how dialed in they really seem to be. And even within that range, when I keep them a little bit cooler, so hotspot stays the same, but ambient's a little bit cooler, they'll be on a little bit longer side. But it's really cool how, I can really predict those well. It's fun. I can write right on the cage, this is the day these are going to have babies, and I'm usually spot on with them.
Damn.
The exception of like sometimes if you get slugs, those are usually going to be a week early,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of snakes are like that. They'll push out, bad stuff early.
Yeah. Have you noticed like they push out slugs and then, a couple days later, a week later, you get healthy babies? Or is it?
No, it's usually all at the same time. Yeah. And unfortunately, if a slug comes first, and I've noticed this with different species of snakes I have, if they've got a few slugs in there, it's like I think it blocks stuff up. And because these are live birth, it's rupturing the egg sac inside, and then those babies are drowning. I had a Russian Sambo a few years ago that I was just watching her give birth, and she stopped, and I thought, well, I could tell there's a mass in there still. And I tried to give her space. Maybe she just didn't want to be watched. And a couple hours later, the mass hadn't really moved. And I pushed out a fairly decent sized slug for a Russian Sambo. You're talking, these things are like the size of a big jelly bean, the slugs when they come out. But she had maybe another, I don't know, it was 8 or 10 babies in there, but every single one was dead. All the stuff before the slugs were fine. So I think that it blocked it, and these babies not being able to get out just drowned in there. So I try to be a little bit more proactive, I guess, if I see stuff like that, but I'm not usually too hopeful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Now those are very different than the rosies. They have, the black Russian Sambos are a little bit smaller even than rosies. A little bit, they're heavier bodied, but they're shorter. And the first year I ever had those, so this was 2008, I think I had my first litter. And I remember telling my wife, based on the female size, and I was comparing her to the size of my rosies, and I said, if I can, because I was pretty sure I saw an ovulation with her, and I said, if I can get 4 babies, I'm going to be so excited. And she dropped 14 babies. But they're like 4 inches long. And they were that first litter was in a tub that I had I used to do the soldering iron holes, and the babies were actually coming out of the soldering iron holes.
Oh no!
And that's pretty much been my average, is 14 babies per litter with them, and it's 14 things. So if I have slugs and babies and add them together, I'm usually right around 14 or 15. Yeah. So I had a little bit bigger one this year, which was cool because that one I was able to get a lot of videos with too. So I caught her in the act, but yeah, that's a fun one too. I think I got the 2006 was probably when I added the black Russian sand boas, and I've got Kenyans too. I've got a few groups of Kenyans, but this is actually the first year. This year is the first year. Well, 2024 is the first year I ever had Kenyans born. I've never really paired them before, but I've done the Black Russians, I think every year since that 2008 litter.
And Black Russians take quite a while to mature, don't they, as adults?
They're slower growers, and I think part of that is the brumation that I put them through.
Mm-hmm.
Those, like I was saying earlier, I've kind of figured out I just want to brumate them when I'm right after they're born. And so, I mean, I'll give them a couple weeks. I'll make sure they all shed. Everybody's seems to be healthy, moving around, and then I'll cool them, put them in the refrigerator. And I usually do 6 to 8 weeks in there, and then I'll pull them up. The nice thing about timing it that way is they're out before my rubber boas are ready to use the same refrigerator. And so then that's when I set them up individually and start working on getting them on food.
Mm-hmm.
They're tough. They're really tough to get eating. I think I did a little better this year, but my 2023 litter, I had 30 or 31 babies that year between 3 litters. And when I put pinkies in there, one of them ate the first time around. And I think a lot of what it is, like if you think about an animal that's that small, a snake that's born that small, if it's finding a rodent in the wild to eat that's small enough for it to eat, it's also finding that rodent's mom.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I suspect that they probably just don't recognize rodents as food yet.
Yeah.
I've been able to find nothing about what they eat in the wild. I found a paper in Russian that I put through like Google Translator, which was kind of cool because you can, read a lot of stuff, but it mainly dealt with what temperatures they're finding them out and active and what temperatures they think they're going dormant. Nothing on food. So maybe it's lizards, maybe it's even bugs. I don't really know.
Dude,
there's some echis that eat crickets. There's 1 or 2 species of saw scale that when they're babies, they come out so small that they'll eat crickets.
I mean, I would personally look into worms or something.
I thought about worms. My concern there is because I give them so much bedding because they like to burrow.
Yeah.
What's going to happen when I can't find that worm and it turns into a beetle or something and I got a bunch of beetles running around the house?
Yeah.
Do you guys, have you ever kept dart frogs?
Yep.
I think you have, Smitty, right? I've heard you talk about that before. I remember reading that black soldier fly larva was such a high protein source and dart frogs love them and everything. And so I'd ordered some of those and I put them in one of my dart frog tanks and they all burrowed down. And the next thing you know, you got all these huge black flies flying in the cage. So every time you open it, they're loose. And I thought, well, I'm done with this game.
So since we're on the topic, what do you do for babies? I mean, obviously you've produced them a couple of times. What's your method for getting
they're not taken?
So I'll give them a while with just trying with the pinkies. I breed my own rodents. I supplement with frozen thawed too, but I breed so I can have about 15 tubs, I guess, of mice. And so I watch real closely. And so when I have 1 or 2 day old pinks, that's the ones I'm going to give them. And some, you'll get more and more, like each week you'll get a little bit more. And then because now they're warm and these are pretty warm snakes. So now that they're in a rack and getting warm, now they're starting to burn the reserves and the calories that they were born with. So when they start getting too skinny, if that's when I'll give them mouse tails. So yeah. So I'll basically cut a bunch of those off and fill a bag in the freezer that I can pull out when I need. And I'll assist feed them those. That seems to get either it's getting their metabolism kicked up to where they're now actively searching out food, or maybe it's also giving them the trigger to realize that this flavor, this scent is edible. But that works for most of them. I lose a few. I'm always going to lose probably, 2 to 5 every year just because some of them are just so resistant to it. I was losing a lot more before. I don't know if you guys know Rufus Darden, but he's the one that gave me the tip about the hopper tails. And I used to be not against, but I really wasn't for assist feeding stuff. My thought being that, well, stuff's not meant to live. I'm not going to force feed. Well, but I think this is a little bit different because if they're not actually recognizing what my food source is,
right.
It's not that it's not a failure to thrive on their part. It's that I don't have whatever it is that they really are going to recognize easiest. So
there's a difference when you don't have access to their natural food source. That's because I'm the same way. Like if it's not going to eat, like for me, a rat snake, I'm really not going to make a rat snake eat,
it's in the name.
Like they eat rodents pretty regularly, and
because probably there's something wrong with it if it's just not.
It's sometimes just not meant to be. That's why snakes have so many babies, because some of them aren't going to make it. But when it comes to something like that, so niche and not actually offering it what it would naturally eat, similarly with, milk snakes, it's hard to get exactly what they're going to eat in the wild. So sometimes you got to take extra steps like assist feeding tails to get them started.
Yep.
Have you tried chick down at all?
I have. I didn't have any luck with that.
Yeah.
And then I've also tried gecko skin, like wrapping a pinky in that, and I didn't have any luck there. I bought a group. So, last year, it was the February show I vended. Last year, I bought 3 morning geckos because I've been told that morning geckos still need other morning geckos, even though they're parthenogenic. I guess you got to have more than one really to trigger them to have babies. Right. I thought by now I'd be having a bunch of eggs, for this year's brood, but I really haven't. They're in a tank with my dart frogs, and I haven't seen any eggs yet. So it's whatever's going on with your guppies. I'm doing the same thing with the morning geckos, apparently. So hopefully that'll kick off, and maybe I can try that.
What species of darts are you keeping?
Like the Costa Rican green and blacks.
Oh, okay.
So I think, I've got one Vitatis, and so the rest would be the
Aratus.
Oh shoot, Aratus. Yeah, thank you. I just drew a blank on those. Yeah, and then my son's got some other Aratus. I can't remember their name. They're called the Kahlua and Cream.
Peña Blancas.
Not those. The other one. The ones that look very similar, but they're cheaper. He's got a group of those in his room.
I've decided that if these guppies don't work out, then that tank is going to get turned into a Vitatis tank, and I'm gonna do darts again for rhino feeders. So
the problem with the Vitatis is they are so loud when they call.
They are loud.
And going from the Aratus and then getting one of those, I had no idea that it was going to be so different,
Yeah, I miss having the house full of chirps.
I don't know. In the spring, it's cool. You're like, it's a little corner of the rainforest right here, after this snowy winter. And then by summer, you're just like, I get it, dude. I don't have a girl for you. Just shut up.
I don't know. They were loud, but I think with a solid glass top and stuff, it kind of muffled it enough to where it wasn't terribly annoying. It wasn't like the Tokay I had where it was like, oh my God, please just fuck off.
I think I would enjoy it personally because where I grew up, we had a 1/4 acre pond out front, and anytime it rained, the toads, you could hear the toads going absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
Just calling and breeding, and man, I would open up my window and just fall asleep to it, man. I loved it.
When I visit my family in Texas, I like listening to the bullfrogs. We have bullfrogs here, but they're nowhere near the house. They're at the ponds I fish and stuff. Yeah, they're cool.
Yeah, I love that, man.
So that's kind of my trick with the Russians to kind of get them on food. And now once they're on food, they're on food. They don't really divert back. It's like once they're eating well. Yeah. And one thing that's interesting about the Russians, they seem to have a very fast digestive system. And I wonder if that's because they're brumating, they have a quicker gestation too than really any of my other snakes seem to have. But I can give bigger meals to the Russians. Even the adults will get bigger meals than like the same size Rosy Boa or something will, because they just digest it so fast and they're ready for another one.
How quick is the gestation in comparison to like Kenyans?
So, I've only had the one Kenyan, so that's hard to say. But they were born, everything was together at the same time. They were born probably a month, 6 weeks before the Kenyan dropped her litter.
Okay.
Yeah. And the Kenyans, I had no problem. They just tossed them a pinky and they ate,
Right. I wonder if with the Russians, it's similar to the Dion's rats that I had, where they're kind of weird. And I think it's a large part of it is an adaptation to being like a legitimate temperate, like higher altitude, much cooler temperatures sort of adaptation to that is you breed those. The gestation period is longer. So they hold on to those eggs longer, but then they lay them and they hatch after like a month in the incubator. And I think my thinking behind that is because they're at cooler temperatures and higher elevations and stuff, they're sort of retaining those eggs and they're sort of incubating in a sense in mom, and then she drops them. And so they hatch quicker because
and especially if they're dark, that's allowing them to really absorb a lot of heat.
Siberia and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's, you'll notice anything that's from a more northern latitude or a higher altitude seems to be a dark animal.
Yeah.
Just like Sonoran boas and Tarahu Tarahumara mountain boas, they're dark. The Russian sand boas are dark. And so I think that's probably exactly it. They want to be able to absorb that heat.
Yeah.
So that would make a lot of sense.
How could you got any Conicus?
I don't. That's one I don't have yet. I'd like to add more. I'm enjoying my sand boas quite a bit. So that's something. I guess I got the Russians because, my name's Miloradovich. I'm Serbian, but there was a famous name in Russia. So I was like, that'd be a cool one to do. But I'd like those. I'd like to do some of the sunsets, the Johnny. I think that would be cool. The Indian sand boas. I think those are really pretty, but I don't know. It's hard. There's always, I'm sure you guys get it. You always want something else, and then part of you sits back and goes, well, if I add something, I should really add something that I can kind of improve on another project or add to or diversify,
Yeah. The Viper boas, though, I know that's definitely wanted to get into those as a sort of a bigger focus of the episode, just because I don't think we've really had anybody that's kept those and had a whole lot of success with them. Those are a fairly recent addition for you?
Yeah, this is the first year I've produced any.
Okay.
It's the first year I've paired any. So, or I keep saying this year, I really mean 2024, but I'm very excited for those. Like, I wasn't sure how things were going to go or really even what my expectations should be with them. Super long gestation. I mean, one of the females, I wrote down her shed was in January, and then when did she have them? November, I think.
Jeez.
So just very, very long. So it's not something I'm going to try. It's definitely not going to be an every year breeder.
Mm-hmm.
I may not even try to do them every other year just because I'll see how they bounce back, because they're an interesting feeder in that it's like they're going to want to, they'll eat for a few times. At least, I mean, I'm working with limited numbers here, but they seem to want to eat 2 or 3 times in a row, and then they want to take a little break and really kind of completely empty out, and then they're going to be back on food 2 or 3 times, and they're going to refuse a little bit more. They're lethargic snakes, so it could be that they're just not moving enough to really pass that stuff through. Yeah, and maybe that's why they're just smart enough to know I don't need any more in here right now, But I mean, they're weird. It's like they won't move from the same spot for a week or more at a time. And I mean, and sometimes you'll see them laying in weird ways. I'm like, oh, that one's dead. Like, its head's halfway on the water bowl and all twisted, and then I'll touch it and it'll jerk, And I mean, it's weird, but they're really cool, but they're also explosively fast at the same time when they want to be. I have one female that she's my more defensive of the two. But when she strikes at me, she'll get her entire body off the ground,
levitate,
which is just crazy to see. It's really cool. So yeah, I feel like, probably mostly luck, but I did have success breeding them this year. So I'm very happy about that. I'm struggling with getting them going and getting them, the babies on food. Again, this is part of the thing I was hoping that I could really utilize those morning geckos for, and I'm just not getting any right now. So I don't know. I think geckos seem to be a trigger for a lot of stuff from that area. So maybe it would. I want to say there's 8 or 9 now that I'm getting to take pinkies, but I've also lost 6 of them that haven't eaten at all. So far not doing excellent at it. I'm probably going to try the mouse tail thing. I'm not sure because they don't seem to be losing a lot of weight yet, the ones that aren't eating. And so that's kind of what I'm watching for. It's like, if they're still maintaining, because if they've got yolk in their system and they've got calories to burn, maybe they're just not eating because of that. So, and I've heard very mixed things on feeding babies. Some people have told me they're really easy. Other people have told me they're very difficult. So I emailed Vin Russo about him one time, and I think he said almost all of his will start immediately on pinkies, but I think he's also on like F3 generation in his collection. So it could be that his original group, the better eaters, those are the ones that survived, and he kept back his breeders, and maybe they've passed that on. I was at Reptilandia this past summer, and I was asking Ketzel about it because he was showing me the Viper boa they have. That is the nicest Viper boa I've ever seen. It is bright red. It's so pretty. But he was telling me, he goes, yeah, well, the tricks, he goes, they're really easy. Just take a pinky mouse and just throw it really hard at their head. I said, throw it at him? And he goes, yeah, because it just mimics a frog jumping. He goes, it'll get him eating every time. So far, it hasn't worked for me, but I'm going to keep trying it.
He's just grenading friggin'
Yeah.
pinkies at these things. That's
You know, but to
I
be
had to
fair,
do with Andros, man, was to like really beat the shit out of him with a pinky to get him pissed off enough to grab it, and then
yeah.
something clicked, and they'd be like, "Oh wait."
well,
I
and
eat
maybe
this.
that's what it's going to take is to.
Have
Yeah.
you tried something like bullfrog leg scenting?
No, and that's not easy to get in Colorado. You know, like I know like grocery stores when I'm in Texas, I'll see frog legs and alligator meat and stuff like that. Any of that stuff's like special order here. Like you can't really get it.
Weird.
Well,
Walmart carries frog legs.
something else you could try, just see if it works. Get you it sucks, but find you a little tree frog outside, freeze it in a small cup of water, and kind of use let it thaw enough to get some of the water from the tree frog juice and use that for scenting because I know they're a pretty wet species. Frogs might be a big trigger for them, and I know tree frogs work with a lot of stuff, so might be worth
Makes
a
sense,
shot.
yeah.
I know the last guy we had on, Justin with milk snakes. That's what he does. He's got that's one of his methods, and he said it's almost foolproof with milks. Is he'll get a tree frog, freeze it in a shallow cup of water, and just let it thaw enough to get some of the water off the top of that with the tree frog smell in it. And he says it's pretty bulletproof with milks. Obviously, I know it's night and day, but it's a way to get the smell of a frog.
Well, and they're obviously eating frogs. I mean, with what Ketzel told me, that mimics a frog. That means that,
right.
That's what they're eating. So that's not a bad idea. There's not really tree frogs here, but I'm sure I could get some scented juice type of thing for them and try that. So there's not a whole lot of frog species here. We do have toads. I did find a spring peeper a couple years ago. In fact, this window well that's right next to me, when I was finishing the basement, I had to put windows in. So I was digging the window well, and I was about 5 feet down, and this little frog hopped out. So he was kind of down there for the winter, I suppose.
Yeah.
Are your Aratus breeding?
They have. I lost one that I'm pretty sure was the only female though, so I haven't seen any tadpoles in a while. So we were when I designed that that tank, I put it with a pond in there, and so they were actually depositing in the bromeliads, and then once they hatched, moving the tadpoles down there. But yeah, I haven't seen any in quite a while. So I don't.
Tatus, man, if you've got a male to Tatus, get your hands on a female or two, and you will be overrun in no time with feeders.
Do they breed quickly then?
Oh yeah, dude. Mine, like, I was wholesaling the Tatus to like Underground and Triple L and like batches of like 30 at a time for froglets. I mean, the Tatus are very, very prolific. And that's why, like, if the guppies don't work out, like, I'll figure out a way to go back to the Tatus because they were producing enough. And the Tatus,
that's not a bad idea because they're going to thrive in the tank because I do keep I keep it fairly wet for the Viper boas.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they're not eating right away, it's not like it's going to die and desiccate,
right.
So that's a thought.
I don't know, dude. Vitatus, they reproduced for me like crazy. And when I got my first rhino from Terry, I offered it 1 or 2 tadpoles that had, had some time to get some size on them and develop, and that thing just went nuts on them. So, Vitatus are definitely a good option as far as if you want something that's going to reproduce a lot and fairly quickly. That'd be, as far as feeders go, like if I'm looking into feeder frog species, it'd be those or the Santa Isabels, the Anthony I.
Mm-hmm. Those are the kind of burgundy ones, right?
Yeah. From what I've seen and heard too, those reproduce even more than the Vitatus do.
I heard those are difficult as tadpoles though because they need moving water.
Maybe I don't know.
I want something I could probably keep in deli cups to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now you got my wheels spinning. That's not a bad idea.
Yeah, because I think I'd even tried some froglets with when I was breeding Cyanea. I had so many, I was like, why not? Let's see if they'll take them, because they weren't taking mice yet either. And it's just to have the option of it being a feeder, it's kind of sucks because I do love darts, and I love the Vitatus when I had them and stuff. But it was like, you know what? If this is gonna work,
they are a pretty one.
We're gonna try it out, but
Yeah.
How big are those babies when they come out?
They're probably about 6 inches. My first litter had more babies in it and they were smaller. I want to say all those were either 7 or 8 grams there was an exception of, no, those were between 8 and 9. And then I had 2 that I think were probably twins because they were both 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had twins a number of times with other species and they've always been about half the size of their non-twin babies. And I know some have 100% been twins because I've had like rainbow boas and rosy boas that have the same umbilical cord. They're still attached. The viper boas come out moving right away. Like they shed right after birth. So they were all spread out. So I'm only assuming they were twins because of the small size. So that, like I said, so other than those 2, I was 8 to 9 grams. And then the second litter this year was all between 10 and 12. And they were, let's see, there were some stillborns in that litter. So I think I only got 6 live out of that. And then the rest stillborns, but even the stillborns were the same size. And I ended up giving those to a local guy that has snake eating snakes. So I figured that's a good use of it. Otherwise they'd just be thrown away. Right. So yeah, they just less babies, but a little bigger. And those ones, you know, those are doing good too. And I think just being bigger probably helps them right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Where did your, how'd you come to get into those in the first place? Like, are your adults imported or what's the there?
So they're imported adults. Oddly enough, I have bought 2 captive born ones and I lost both of them. So one was from Vin Russo and then the other one was one I found on Morph Market that was captive born. And I think the Morph Market one never really ate well and it was a larger animal. So I know it was eating from the guy I got it from. And then the one from Vin Russo, I mean, it was doing great. And then it had refused like 2 meals in a row. And then I found it dead. So it's one of those, you know, I was keeping it exactly like the other one. So I don't really think it was a husbandry thing, but it's kind of like what Jake was talking about earlier, where sometimes you just wonder, like, is there something internal that was going on that maybe it wasn't able to pass food as well and something rotted in its gut or what it could have been? Because it was growing, it was putting on size and then it just belly up one day.
I really think that's more common than we care to think. Like I had a carpet python die on me randomly years and years ago, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't something viral, so I had a autopsy done or necropsy done, and the snake literally had leukemia. Like it's one of them, it was so random, and so I just think that type of stuff is, you know, when you have something randomly die, it happens to us. You know, why couldn't it happen to anything else, really? You know, so although I don't think it's super duper common, I don't think it's necessarily uncommon. I certainly have more snakes that live long, healthy, happy lives, you know, more often than I have ones randomly die. But like with this milk snake, it just started dropping weight pretty rapidly and nothing was different from its counterparts. Literally in a tub right next to it, same temperature, same feeding regimen, same water changes, same everything. But this one started losing weight and just died. So,
well, and the thing with reptiles too is there's really no way for them to tell us there's a problem.
Exactly.
And they don't give us a lot of signs. So if they are hurting on the inside or if there is something weird, by the time we notice it, a lot of times it is too far gone. Like, you know, you said that one had leukemia, but there was probably no outward signs until it was, you know, dead or close to, right?
Literally, it took a weird shit the day before it died, and then it died. Yeah. Like that was the first sign I saw. Everything was fine. No, it refused food, and I was like, okay, that's weird. And then it took a weird dump that was all green and gross looking. I was like, oh, we need to make a vet appointment. I literally made a vet appointment that day, and then it was dead the next day. And I just used that vet appointment for a necropsy. Like it's so weird. And I was so afraid it was going to be, you know, some viral disease that I had that was going to wipe everything out. And they came back and was like, it was leukemia. Its kidney had stopped working and it just died.
Isn't cancer fairly common with like carpet pythons and stuff?
Yeah, I think, cancer is pretty common with, you know, quite a bit of stuff, especially into older animals. I mean, this was a young animal. It was 2-3 years old, but, you know, I think stuff like cancer and, things like that are, not
You know,
necessarily uncommon.
I've lost young snakes. Like I'll have a litter and, randomly lose one that sometimes they'll bite themselves. And I've often wondered if that's something's going on inside and,
Mhm. I had that.
the rest of the litter will be fine, but there's just this one that you found dead and it's biting its own belly or something.
That literally happened with the first snake I ever owned. It was an albino corn snake. And one day I went in the cage and it was biting itself and it was doing like barrel rolls, and I took it out and it like died in my hands, and I was super traumatized as a 13-year-old kid, and it was terrible. But
no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, just weird stuff, man. It's.
Did you see that picture? Frank, I think his name's Patanella. He posted a picture just this week of one of his snakes that aggressively went after a mouse and like tied itself in a literal knot that was so tight that he had to untie it.
Jesus.
Oh no.
Yeah. Could you imagine? I mean,
snake?
I'd have to go back and look at the post and see what it was, but it was funny, because you got to wonder, does that happen in the wild? Because if they can't get it undone, they're done for,
I mean, you've seen some king snakes that have literally started eating their tail.
I've seen pictures of that. I lost a Rosie once that actually crawled backwards into its own shed and couldn't get out. And it died in there. And I've seen it 2 other times, but both times I've been able to get it out, because I've seen it right away. But it's the weirdest thing.
Suffocated or something?
I guess, or maybe it panicked and thrashed around enough. Because I mean, it was one I had checked on, probably the day before, if not the day before that. So it was really weird. I have a funny picture I took of a rubber boa that did the same thing, but it actually stuck its head out of the vent hole in the shed. So it looks like it has a dunce cap on, So.
I think one of the worst ones I've heard of, luckily this didn't happen to me, but this girl I used to work with years ago, she had a ball python and she fed live rodents to it. And she said that she fed her ball python a live rodent. She watched it, grab it, constrict it, and eat it. She walked away. A couple hours later, she came back with a split open ball python and a live rodent walking around.
Whoa.
Like she had no reason to lie to me. She only had a couple snakes. Like this thing, I guess it just stunned the rodent and it came alive and clawed its way out of the snake.
Wow, I would expect that more with something that ate a lizard, because I mean, because lizards, they have to constrict those quite a long time to actually kill it. Rodents seem to die pretty quick, but that's crazy.
Yeah, I was like, God, dude, that's fucked up, dude. Especially because it was just a pet, like she was.
And now you got to deal with that rodent.
Yeah,
and it's aggressive now.
Yeah, no, I would. Oh God, I was like, that's messed up, man. Like that would suck.
Was it really big compared to the size of the size of the ball python?
She didn't specify, but it had to have been an adult, an adult rodent versus maybe a smaller size of the ball python. But yeah, I mean, it was just nuts. She had literally walked in, the ball python was basically split open mid body, and that rodent was just walking around.
That's crazy.
It's like, God damn, dude, that's horrible.
I'm glad I don't feed a lot of live. I have a few that I do, but mostly it's for the babies is why I breed the mice and stuff. But,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no. But yeah, so back on the viper boas, are they as nasty as a lot of people say they are, as far as defensiveness? And
I've heard they're rather prickly.
So of the 2 adult females that that gave birth for me this year, one is a lot more defensive than the other. The larger one I can pick up and she's fine. She's never really struck at me or anything. She's pretty calm. The other one, it's kind of hit and miss. Like she's the one that'll leave the ground when she strikes. And I have handled her, but I kind of tend to leave her alone.
Yeah.
I think the reputation is a little undeserved. In the sense that a lot of what's in the hobby right now are wild caught, field collected.
Yeah, sure.
So they're probably just more defensive because of that. I mean, think about the the reputation that blood pythons used to have, or even retics. I mean, I remember 20 years ago where every retic that you saw was just mean as hell, but they were also a wild caught, and I think
it was
some
the
stuff,
same thing with ball pythons years and
right?
years
Yeah.
ago.
And some stuff maybe calms down better in captivity than others. And so, but I think as we start getting further into captive bred, viper boas, we're going to see that they're actually pretty calm snakes. The babies, in fact, I had texted some pictures to the other guys that were in the Reptile Gumbo, or the Pint Size podcast with me that was on the Reptile Gumbo network. And they, that was one of the questions that one of them had was like, well, how many times you get bit taking those babies out? And I was like, none of these babies has even struck at me,
Damn.
So I think they're pretty good. Now they're not a snake. How do I phrase this? They handle like a snake that doesn't ever leave the ground. That's really what they feel like. So they're one that you really have to support differently. Like I can hold a rainbow or one of my like locality boas or something, and I like to say that boas kind of hold you back, because they'll wrap on, and you can really do something with your other hand while you're holding one over here.
Right.
The viper boas are one that I really want to support well. And I think if I did try to let go and just hold them with one hand, they're probably going to panic, and then you're going to start seeing the flailing or maybe even the striking. But I think that's more of a security thing, because they're not one that just really seems like, they're kind of like holding a sand boa. You know how they are, like, you feel like they're going to fall if you're not real careful. That's the same impression I get
when they're off the substrate.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
I think that.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the vipers are the same way in that they want that full belly contact for it to feel secure. So,
and I think sometimes it may even like have something to do with like them in being in, I won't say actual pain, but like it's not outside of being uneasy about it. Like it might be truly uncomfortable for them because they're heavier bodied snake, and then their back half is just.
That's true. Is it putting weird pressure on their ribs or their spine or something?
Exactly. Like, how do you feel if like you're hanging on the edge of something and your legs are just hanging down? Like it kind of hurts. Like it doesn't feel good, and them not having the prehensile tails that carpets or other, species of boas would have.
Sometime off the ground.
Right. It's
right. And those species, their spines are probably bent or made to bend and move a little bit in a different way too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a great point. Yeah,
because you see bloods a lot like that. I hate when people you'll see them hold a big old blood and their back half is just dangling down there. I'm like, that does not look comfortable, dude.
Because they don't even pick it up themselves. The snake itself doesn't have that muscle control the same way to pick it up. Yeah, so I kind of think that's where viper boas are, and I think handled properly, consistency is key too. I mean, I think we've learned that with. Any species. I get asked about rainbows all the time, well, is it going to be nice? And they're the same way in that it just really takes that consistent handling. They got to get used to you, And so I think most snakes are probably, most animals in general, if you locked your dog outside and only tossed it food and, it's not going to trust you either.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for consistent handling. And let's be honest, all snakes pretty much tolerate being held at the very least. Just because they're not biting you, doesn't mean they're enjoying it. So let's be real.
Yeah, and that is a fine line, because there are sometimes I do think they like the maybe the movement and the climbing around you.
Yeah. That's why
opportunity to stretch, even.
Yeah, and like the opportunity to explore. Like I would almost prefer having some type of jungle gym for them to go around and just explore a little bit and work some of those senses. But like people talking about my snake loves me and wants to cuddle. I'm like I don't really
likes to watch TV with me. It has its favorite shows. Yeah. Yes. I was actually talking to a friend just this past weekend at the Show Me show, but about the climbing trees, the stuff like that. I'd love to have something for them. The thing is, I'd want to be able to like sterilize it between, so I don't know, maybe steam it with F10 or something before you move other animals onto it. But I would love to have something like that. Just let them have that chance to explore. And especially if it was one that you could kind of take apart and move around in different configurations.
Yeah.
It would be kind of cool.
So one thing I did, and this probably sounds dumb, but it worked. When I was still living with my parents, I was keeping snakes. My mom had this old drying rack that she would put clothes on. It was just this wooden thing that would
Oh,
collapse.
yep.
And it had like wooden dowels, and it was like 5 feet tall. I would literally take carpet out to clean, and I would set it on top of that and let it work its way down around, and they would just explore all over this thing while I cleaned the cage, and it actually worked very well. Like, no, it didn't look super cool, but I mean, it worked very well for them to explore and let me do my thing while they were occupied.
And obviously that's a lot better for them than sticking them in a real small tote while you clean the cage or something,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I just watched a video the other day of, I think she's called Benson Boas, but she has started a YouTube channel and she's got her, the new boa room video. And she has a wall, like it's like a kid's play gym, really, but it has those handholds for like rock climbing that they have.
Yeah.
And so she's letting the boas climb on all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I've seen those.
And I thought that was a pretty cool idea.
I've seen some of those to where like people have like fake plants on them and it goes like all the way around like the top of the room. These things are up at the ceiling just going around. And
yeah,
I think it's cool, man. I'm not like big on the whole, I mean, I shouldn't say I'm not big on it, but like the whole I can't remember the term, but I think stuff like that is important for snakes just to get them, get them turning. They like to explore just like we do. And
it's something different than their everyday too,
Yeah, like throw some leaves, random leaves in a snake's enclosure and watch them go all through that thing and for the different smells
or even a shed.
Yeah,
a shed from another.
Oh yeah,
they'll go pretty crazy for that. We were the kids and I were at the Denver Zoo one time, and they had snake sheds hanging up in the tiger enclosures for the same reason. It was just something different for them to explore and sniff around on.
Yeah, for sure.
I was going to trying to find that rubber boa I was telling you about photo. I'll have to send it to you guys. So I don't see it in my phone here anymore.
For sure.
But
so where do you think people struggle the most with viper boas? Like, what do you think the biggest holdback on them is? Is it the keeping, the feeding, the defensiveness?
Probably establishing them, just I would say. I mean, I'm obviously not the first person to breed them, and I think we're getting you're seeing a lot more people have success with them. And establishing an animal with wild caught, sometimes it's just leaving them alone too.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of a lot of success. And maybe people get a little burned out when something's not working the very first time. And, sometimes it takes just years to really get a project going. And maybe that's where we need to be at are some of these maybe just getting moved around too quickly where they're not in the same house and to really build that comfort level that they need to breed successfully.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all if that was the case, because I have the Gonyosoma Jansen eye, and I feel like that's a big part of the success with those as imports is to just like give them what they need as far as food and water, but other than that, just like pretend they're not there.
Just leave them alone, let them do their thing. Yeah,
it sucks because you want to play with them and you want to interact with them and stuff, but they clearly don't enjoy it, and I think you're only making things harder for yourself when you're trying to force that kind of thing. But also they strike me as something similar to sort of green trees, to where it's, people are under the impression that they're difficult to keep alive and difficult to be successful with. But if you kind of just give them what they need in the right parameters, like they're really not difficult. You just got to give them the right stuff.
100%. And that's, I think, viper boas, but many, many other species, that's the same thing. Like I mentioned, I got the rainbow boas, my first ones in 1996. Mm-hmm. And I was told by a lot of people that they were an advanced species and I didn't, wasn't going to be able to have success with them. I kind of fell into, I think, being successful with them because I was putting fountains in their cages. I did everything wrong. I mean, they were on carpet, I had screen tops, but I had those little fountains, and I think that was the humidity they need.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of stuff is just misunderstood. I mean, with the Viper boas, could it be that a lot of people are just keeping them too hot, like with blood boas? I mean, I think once that was figured out with blood boas and short tails, that they're just angry because they're too damn hot.
Right.
So like with mine, I kept them. Without knowing a lot about them, I kept them like I keep my rainbow boas. So they're on a mix of Reptile and sphagnum moss. It's probably about a 50-50 blend. I have 2 water bowls in there because I want one that's large enough for them to soak, but they also will push a lot of bedding into their bowls. So I have a smaller one with the idea being that there will always be a really fresh water for them to drink. I've never seen them drink out of that. I've never seen them drink out of either bowl really, but so I don't know if they're using it, but that was kind of the thought, was if they really get a lot of stuff in one bowl, because I am changing the bowls for the Viper boas quite a bit because they do push a lot of stuff in there. But I'm keeping them on the cooler side. And then they're in the room, the whole room gets cooled, and I drop their nighttime temperatures just like I did my rainbow boas. So I drop them in the wintertime when it is cooler. I mean, I really turn the nighttime off. So I guess they're getting down to the pretty low 70s. They're getting a longer nighttime and a shorter daytime. And then I'm giving the heat again in the daytime. I didn't feed them at all, through that, the part of the winter cycle, when I put them together, and I did see, because I put them together during the cooling period, and I did start seeing some breeding activity early on. So I did start giving them meals a little bit earlier just because I saw they were breeding. So if something was grabbing, I did want it to have some reserves. But, maybe that helped too, just keeping them a little bit on the cooler side. It's hard to say when it's something that, I'm so new at. Like I said, it could have been a lot of pure luck too, but.
I mean, you did something right, man. I mean, I don't know. I think with snakes, I think where a lot of people mess up is they try to do too much. They get too specific and they try to keep it too pinpoint, and that can cause more problems than good. I think if you just kind of know the natural, progressions of the animal and their environment, and you kind of just let them do their thing, it's I'm a firm believer of being hands off and letting them do their thing. Like this whole, I understand like paying attention to your animals and seeing when they ovulate, but I am one of those people that like, I'm a pair of snakes, and if they go, they go. Me sitting there finger fucking them to see if they've got eggs and if they ovulate and if they have follicles and this and that and blah, blah, blah all the time. It's not really going to do much except possibly stress them out and make this whole process even more difficult.
Or even stop it. I mean, how many times have you checked on a pair that's courting and you're like, oh, they're almost together. And then you check on them later and they're completely separated. And you're like, crap, was that because I looked at them?
Right. Because you looked
feeding.
at them.
I mean, I'm sure you guys have had it too, where you check on an animal that, I fed this and then it's crap. It's in the middle of eating and now it's, spitting it back out.
Right.
So, I mean, they're pretty sensitive to stress, a lot of animals, and especially going back to anything that is going to be wild caught,
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to be a lot more so. I mean, snakes that were born here and know me, I mean, they're still going to be a little bit on edge, right? So stuff that's not used to humans at all, I just look like a huge predator.
Yeah, that's my thing, man. I've established several, wild caught rat snakes, which I know is very different from something like a viper boa, but at the same time, I treat them all the same. Just leave them the hell alone, man. Yep. Keep them semi-sterile, keep them dark, and stay hands off. Feed them and change water bowls. Like I'll do spot cleanings when I do water dishes and stuff, but like I even keep cleanings to a minimum. Obviously, you don't want it nasty in there, but at the same time, like brand new, like I don't do full bedding changes very often on, especially something I'm establishing, because even something as simple as bedding changes can stress it out. Yep. It's like, this isn't the same as it was. Like, what's different? Now I'm freaked out. And, it's just.
That is something that I do. It's a little harder with the viper boas because they do like to get in the water a lot. So if they're displacing a lot of water and I'm getting the rest of the cage is really too wet, I'm kind of forced to do a lot of it. But
Yeah.
I will, kind of like you talked about, I'll try not to do like a whole bedding change where maybe I'll leave the front, one half a little bit wetter and only change the back half so that they have kind of a dry option and a more wet option. But it's interesting because they do, like I said, they like to push a lot of the bedding in there. The Calibars I'm finding are the same way. Like when they have fresh water, it's like the first thing they'll do is go put the magnolia leaves back in the water. And so it's either they want the tannins in the water or probably more likely they want the cover as they soak, and not to be so exposed.
And sometimes as much as like your reptile brain wants to immediately change the water, sometimes I'll let it sit an extra, couple days because they obviously wanted it like that. It's one thing when a baby rat snake just fills a small water dish with a bunch of aspen, like they're just being shits.
Yep.
But like if you notice, like it's specifically putting these leaves in the water dish, like maybe let it sit a couple days, like it's not, it can't, obviously there's limits to all of these things. I'm not saying I never change the bedding on my snakes, but
you're not like, oh, they like the crap in there, I better let them sit in the crap water.
But like for a lot, and one thing I do with hides, especially if I'm doing a bigger bedding change, what I'll do with like a hide, if there's poop all over it, I'll clean it, but I don't like scrub it with bleach and dish soap. Like I go get the nasties off of it and then I put it back in. You get the obviously disgusting, gross stuff off of it, but leave it to where it still smells familiar to them. Like our buddy Phil talks about, some of the cobras he keeps, and the first thing they do is shit all over their hides because it's their territory and they're marking it and it's familiar. And he doesn't really clean those hides because it helps with them. And I think that goes a long way with other stuff, man. Like,
and especially the hides, because that's their secure spot, right?
Exactly.
So that's what they really want. I do use bleach and Dawn dish soap when I'm doing like a full sterilization and everything. So like if I'm cleaning a bunch of water bowls at once, they get done that way. But otherwise I try to rotate between like F10 and chlorhexidine and just kind of I wipe down the inside of the cage and stuff like that.
And I'm certainly not saying don't clean your enclosures. That's not what I'm getting at all. But like there's some people,
leave a little part of them.
There's some people that like every week they'll do like a full bedding change, a full enclosure disinfectant, and it's like that's fine, I guess, but like if some stuff isn't really taking off like it should, it might be because you're constantly changing its habitat, man. Like
they're not sterile in the wild. They don't need to be sterile here.
Absolutely.
I found stuff seems to settle better. Like if you upgrade, if I'm moving a Baird's or something from something smaller into something larger, like taking some of that old bedding and sort of spreading it out in there.
I do it every single time.
I have seen a noticeable difference in chondros too. Like I'll take the the paper towel that they're sitting over in a smaller tub when they get bumped up to something larger. I'll take that old paper towel and leave it in there, and I notice they seem to adjust so much better when they have that familiarity. And I'm doing it now with tarantulas too, where if I rehouse something and move it into something bigger, I take some of that old web and put it around whatever the new hide is, and they seem to same thing. Like, okay, I know what this is. This is me. This is familiar. And they seem to sort of settle in much, much faster, much better than if you just get rid of all of that and just give them something completely fresh and something completely new.
It's a good idea. Kind of ease them into that acclimation.
Yeah, I do the same thing like with snakes that if I upgrade a tub, I'm usually upgrading a hide, giving it a bigger hide box. But I've taken some, like even with like Pituophis, I had one that it very much outgrew this hide that I had, and I updated the enclosure, but I still took that hide that it couldn't even fit in, and I just threw it in there, just because, and then added a little bit of bedding on top, kept the same hide in there, and it just smells, man, like it helps. Like that's why a lot of snakes, if you ship them off, sometimes they'll just go off of food at their new home. Mm-hmm. At least temporarily, and well,
and with the hide, sometimes snakes just want that smaller thing, I didn't mention it earlier, but I think that one thing that's helped my success with the Black Russians too. I think I sent you guys a picture of those racks I built.
Yeah.
So those are the long, skinny tubs Freedom Breeder makes.
Yeah.
And before, I've always put my Black Russian sand boas in the iris, the shoebox size. So it's like 6 or 8
Like 6
quarts,
quart.
maybe something like that.
6
So
quarts.
the footprint, the square inches is probably the same. It's just that these other ones are long and skinny.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting a lot more that eat those first few rounds. Like they'll, maybe not the first time, but a lot are eating on their own better than I used to do. And I think it's the narrow where they can get all the way in the back, but they can feel the sides close to them. And so I suspect that might be helping them a little bit.
Yeah.
It's also probably giving them a better temperature gradient.
Yeah.
Because it is so, and I'm doing those ones I built are all back heat. So I think that it's just giving them more options. And I tell you, I like having the built-in water bowl holder too. Not having flip stuff.
I'm a big, I like those as long as that, like the only scenario I didn't like the built-in water dish holder is on my VE35S's. I got some with the built-in water dish. And I would like it more if it was more to the front and slightly to the side. This one is a little too centered, so it's kind of weird putting hides in. But I love having, like, on those longer, skinny ones, having it so close to the front, like it's perfect. I love them.
Yeah,
I hate those things.
So it's really dry here. And one thing, so the last, what would that be? The 70 size racks I built. I did it belly heat traditionally like it is, where it's mostly in the back and stuff. And I like the Freedom Breeder as opposed to the what's the other one? The ARS. The ARS ones are really far to the front, and I like the bowl. The only reason I like the Freedom Breeder's bowl more towards the middle, and it's like a third way back, but it really gives them a usable cool side and a back. One thing I like about the ARS is they're more square, like the sides come straight down. The Freedom Breeder's pretty cool. So I feel like it gives you a more usable bottom. But anyway, one thing I thought about is what if I build something where I use the tub backwards and I put the heat tape right under where that small water bowl is. And that would, and basically for humidity, right? So you've got heated water that's putting humidity for some of these high humidity species that I do, because it's crazy dry here. Mm-hmm. And you get these bigger tubs with a water bowl holder, they're still using a 12 or 16. So these high humidity snakes need a bigger bowl anyway. So if I use that just packed full of damp sphagnum moss, and that all that heat was doing was pushing that humidity into the air, I think that would actually work pretty well.
I know some people have done that with, like, in cages with heat panels in them. They'll put the water dish under the heat panel and it'll evaporate quicker and create more humidity in the cage.
Yeah,
we're fortunate that humidity is not a big issue here most of the time. And anytime I need to fix any humidity issues, I usually just go for an oversized water bowl, and that tends to do the trick. So we're fortunate. We don't struggle with dryness.
No, I will say I have had a little bit of dry problems here because, like, for whatever reason, even in the summer, I'm usually running a heater in here just to keep it in the high 70s, low 80s. And it will get semi dry. That's relative for other people. It's not.
Do you
like
run a humidity in the room or humidifier in the room?
No, I usually don't have to be honest, because it still stays. When I say dry, for me, a dry humidity is 30%. Which a lot of people, that's not dry. For me, that's dry in my snake room.
That's nosebleed worthy in South Carolina.
When my oldest son was born, so my sisters are born and raised in southern Texas, south of Houston by the Gulf, and so they came here to meet their nephew, and we had a humidifier going in the baby's room, and they walked out and said, "What's making that fog in there?" They'd never seen a humidifier before.
Yeah, no, it is not a common thing here. We don't have humidity issues. Like, I think last year, it was funny. Last year in the winter, I kind of cooled the whole room. It got a little too cold for the pythons that I preferred, but I turned my heater off. And in the winter, it got up to, like, I think 50-60% humidity in the snake room, because I had, the vent off and, no heater going. It got really humid in the dead of winter here.
That's about the best I can do with a humidifier running here.
Dude, dead of summer here. Like if you get around to August, you go outside, it'll be like 80% humidity.
Oh, that feels so good.
It's disgusting, dude. It's horrible. It makes herping miserable around here.
Yeah, it does.
But
yeah, and that is a big difference with the humidity, because I know, like, when I'm in Texas, it's same thing. It's super, super hot. And here it could be a hot day in the summer. You go in the shade and it's 20 degrees cooler. When
Yeah.
you're in a place that's humid, there's no difference,
yeah. So I've heard different answers, and it's mostly from one guy who's from South Dakota. And he told me it gets so hot in South Dakota, but it's so dry. And because it's so dry, you don't sweat as much. But here, he said it was better because it's humid and you sweat more and it cools you down. And I've always heard that the opposite, the humidity makes it worse.
Definitely makes you stickier, but
yeah.
I like humidity. I mean, maybe I got a little bit of reptile in me. I don't know. I tend to enjoy it. Like it gets so dry here, your skin will split, and your fingertips will crack and bleed and stuff. But I don't know. It'd be nice if there was a better middle ground. You know, that 100% humidity, it's hard to breathe and everything else. And
oh, dude, yeah. And some days here, I used to work at a little sandwich shop when I was in high school, and
Which one?
Dead of summer, it was ice cream and sandwich shop downtown. It's called Kooky Mookie's. Remember that? Long time ago. But we'd be working, water festival, and in the dead of summer here, and it would be so hot and humid outside, and it was so cold inside. The entire windows would be fogged up and literally dripping from the humidity outside. And you just walked outside and it felt like you were swimming, and it was just gross, dude.
we get that condensation on the inside of the windows in the winter here, because I run a whole house humidifier.
Yeah.
So it hooks to your furnace, so that when the furnace is pumping, it blows a little bit of moisture and stuff through the air.
Yeah.
Not what I'm shooting for in the snake room. Obviously, I'm trying to get a little more in there, but anything that will help, right?
Yeah.
So are you doing the 2 water bowl thing for the rainbows?
Yeah. So rainbows,
is that
they get the 2 water bowl too?
With
rainbows, they're sensitive to being dried out. So especially babies, like if you let a bowl dry out, you probably only have a day or 2 before you have a dead rainbow boa. So you want to make sure you have fresh water in there. They do like to soak. They will get in there. But really, it's just being diligent. The one thing I like especially like we go out of town, I'm always going to have 2 water bowls, because that way, if they flip one, there's always a backup,
Yeah.
But I like to, same thing, because I do use the Reptile and sphagnum mix for those too. So same thing, they are going to get some in the water and stuff. So I keep that smaller one with the idea that it gives them that fresher water to drink. But again, I don't know if they might still be drinking out of the dirty bowl. But rainbows, they like fresh water. I mean, a lot of snakes seem to be, they'll come and take a drink when you give them fresh water. Rainbows, it's almost every time. I mean, if I give them a fresh bowl, they're going to come drink out of it, right away. And, and maybe it's just also that they're kind of exploring something new in the tank and then realize, but they seem to like fresh water. And it would make sense when you think about it. They're found in the wild. They live near streams a lot of times. Mm-hmm. So they're near running water. They're also in places that get a lot of rainfall and a lot of dew. So they probably have access to fresh water in the wild, where stuff from an area where they're forced to drink stagnant water is going to be less picky about the fresh water. But I think stuff that has access all the time to fresh water, they're just going to prefer it,
Yeah, absolutely. So it makes more sense for, those rainforest species, because, I think they benefit a lot from the actual rainwater, Yeah.
Like, and whether it's collecting in puddles or in the cup of leaves, but they've got pretty constant access, I would assume, during the wet season anyway,
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes sense. Though I had certain boas I've kind of taken care of, years and years ago when I was living in Texas. I was helping take care of a rainbow boa, and man, that thing was finicky when it came to water. It definitely wanted fresh water, high humidity, and it was
such a pretty boa though. Rainbows, like I said, they caught my eye way back then in that that book at the library, but I've been pretty obsessive about rainbows since. Like they're
I
awesome.
am pretty much solely a wild type guy, other than, I have some, locality morph rat snakes here, but I think rainbows are the absolute best example of the wild type is prettier than any morph.
Yeah, why
you'll
even need
find.
morphs?
Like the leucistics are cool and all, but like a normal rainbow is better than any morph that exists in those things.
Just
Way
like
better looking than leucistics, way better looking than the pieds. Like, I don't
Well,
know.
and one thing, so the leucistics are a Colombian morph, and I
Right.
do some Colombian stuff. So my Colombian rainbows, I have leucistic stuff, albino, Anri. Last year I did pair some double hets for Anri and albino that I had made a few years before, and I'm not sure if I got a snow or not yet. There's one that's really, really light, but there's the Anris start out pretty they're not as cool. They age into, they look way better as they age. So it could be that this one, maybe it's a snow and it needs to grow into it. I don't know. But I also now produce the Brazilian caramel albinos.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I would say for rainbows is it's a scale shape that gives them the iridescence, but the lighter the base color, the harder it is to see that iridescence.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. I mean, that's where they get their name. And that's one thing the wild types really have going for them is that darker base, and in the right light, I mean, they just glow,
Yeah.
they're so cool.
And that makes sense because the Brazilians are naturally darker than the Colombians. And I've always noticed the Brazilians are have a lot more of that iridescent going on than the Colombians. And that makes sense with being a darker pigmented snake. It's that would.
Well, and they're a lot more, I think they're more desirable for a lot of people. The Colombians are beautiful in their own right, but
yeah, absolutely.
They age out brown, where the Brazilians are reds and oranges, and
the Brazilians really hold that Brazilian, dude. That's one of those snakes that like normal Brazilian rainbows from babies to adults look almost exactly the same.
Yeah, well, they get better. They're more brown. Or they get more contrast and brighter colors as they age. And what's neat when you see one move fast, so they have a very busy pattern with their back saddles, and then the side medallions and everything about them is just very busy. And then they get the iridescence on top of that. And when you see one move fast, it's almost blurry. And it really makes you think, well, okay, all this is probably a defense mechanism, because if you imagine a predator is going after it and all of a sudden it can't really see it anymore, because it's moving so fast and it's got all these colors changing at the same time. It's really neat,
It's like when corals move really quick, there's almost this weird optical illusion.
Like you can't focus anymore.
It's like a blur. It's like a blur.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. I don't know. I'm really partial to rainbows. I mean, I'm partial to everything. It's hard, at different times of the year. It's almost like you're focused. When I'm pairing rosies and babies are being born, I'm like all about the rosies. But the rainbows, I don't think I'll ever be without a rainbow boa.
I also think some of the circular stuff on rainbows almost like, and this is just a theory, I could be full of shit and nobody could actually know, but like I always have this theory of like heavily saddled animals like that, like, or just like that have a lot of circles on them. It almost like makes it look like a different area for a predator to locate that they might identify as a head. Like hognoses will make their tails into circles to make it look like a head, and so a predator will go for a tail instead of their actual head, and it's just, I always wonder about stuff like that.
So when the rainbows are angry, or when they're scared, their tail, they'll make a really, really tight coil with their tail, and it's always a sign that it's time to leave this one alone. She's, it's had enough of me for today or whatever. But they do that same thing, that really, really tight coil. It's weird.
I've always heard with hognoses, that's to mimic an area for a predator to hone in on, of like, hey, this is my head over here. Don't hit my actual head, because if something's going to be taken off, I would rather it be my tail than my actual head. And it's just crazy how snakes have developed those types of defense mechanisms, like,
well, we talked a little bit about the rubber boas, and they do the same thing. They have that blunt tail, So they'll actually be raiding a nest of mice, and they're using the tail to fight off the adults. They're, using it as this fake head. And the calibars are the
Really?
same way. When calibars are defensive, they'll ball up and they'll stick the tail out. A lot of their tails have a white spot on the underside too. So I think it's to get attention, but they'll wave that tail while they protect the head. And, those
Wow.
it's weird because the rubbers and the calibars, they seem like it's been convergent evolution on completely different continents, but they fill a very similar niche because they're nest
Right.
raiders. They use the tail to fight off adults. Now the calibars have a much tougher skin.
Yeah.
So maybe it is the prey items that they're, the adults, maybe the adults they're fighting are tougher. I don't know, but it's neat because their behavior is so similar,
Mhm. It's like with some species that have the really pointed tails, like Pitchophis have a really pointy tail, and they use that for the burrowing aspect, and it's nuts, man, how all these snakes have developed to fill a certain niche in the wild, and it's incredible, man. Evolution is insane.
Yeah, it's amazing. Even ones that will share a habitat, and how, the niche partitioning, where you'll get some that have developed a very certain thing that they're utilizing this one space so the other animals can have this space. And
Right.
it's fun. I don't know. I love all this stuff.
Yeah. It almost like hurts my brain to think about too much, but it also is so fucking cool, man.
Right. And it's like I talked about with the rubbers earlier, like that's how neat is it going to be, thousands of years from now? Are we going to have rubber boas that are completely different from other parts of their range? I think if they had a kind of pattern, that's typically what we see first, right? So it might not be, it might be the way they use the habitat starts changing or something like that, but who knows? I mean, I could be way off base, but it's like, so I've got Pearl Island boas, and they're a longer, more slender snake than, size-wise, proportionately, they're long and slender compared to the mainland boas, but they're utilizing trees there. They're eating smaller prey items, so they have a more narrow, long head because they don't need that wide jaw to eat big rodents like mainland boas and stuff do.
Right.
And so over time, stuff is changing. And so are they going to do that too? Who knows? Might be fun to see if we can stick around long enough.
Yeah. That's a big if, unfortunately, the way we're treating the planet.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's so cool. I love seeing just little differences in animals like that. And I'm glad you brought up the rubber boa thing about the tail, because I never thought about that big, fat, blunt tail mimicking the head. Yeah, a lot of stand boas are like that. They have that fat, blunt tail that looks very similar to the front half. And that's really interesting.
Another similarity that I find really neat about the calibars and the the calibars and the rubbers is they're both ones that I give multiple small prey items to, which is funny to me because years ago, you used to always hear you never give multiple prey items because it would make a snake sick or make it regret. And it's like, well, why? I mean, I can see if you're giving it multiple of too large of a size, but some snakes, they're obviously built to eat that way. But both rubber boas and calibars, they'll constrict with different parts of their body. So they're not like grabbing three prey items and wrapping it in one big coil. They're biting one and wrapping it with the neck, and then they're slapping the tail and wrapping another one there, and then they're using the middle body to do it. And I fed some rubber boas before they were in brumation, and I actually watched one literally I'd put the rat pinkies kind of all in the same spot, and it bit one and grabbed it, and when it wrapped it, it kind of pulled away, but it slapped one with its tail to its mid body, wrapped that, and then used the tail to wrap the other. And it was the neatest thing to watch. I'd never seen one actually throw the prey item to a different part of its body like that. And so now I'm going to be watching a lot more when I feed those. See if they keep doing it.
I use the same example with Pitchophis because I work with several Pitchophis, and keeping those things, like if you keep them in racks, keeping them in a rack is so difficult because like their Pitchophis are also nest raiders, and what they do, instead of constricting because they're in tight burrows, they actually crush prey. Like they'll go and raid a nest, and so whenever I feed mine, they'll be constricting the prey, but their bodies will be up, so I'll go to like push the snake down and they push back because they feel they feel something touching them, so they immediately go to crush whatever is pushing against them because they think it's another prey item.
Yep.
Because they'll go in these burrows, get a nest, and these babies are moving around. So anything that they touch, they're pushing against the walls and just crushing them. And
do you ever use that to your advantage with picky feeders? Because ball pythons will do the same thing. And I've had ones that won't take a prey item, that instead of offering it to their face, I'll offer it to the side of their body between it and the tub, and they'll do the same thing. They'll push it up against there, and that seems to trigger that. Like they're maybe not constricting, but that pinning, and then they'll eat it.
Yeah,
And
I always like try and tap mid body just to get a reaction out of them, but it's normally to just kind of piss them off. But I have to give that a go. See if I can't get one to like actually pin a prey item against the side of the wall.
And then slowly walk away and let it do its thing, and I bet it eats it.
Yeah,
I feel like the black pines would be good for that because I feel like their goal is to make everything suffer as much as possible.
Dude, my black pines are pretty chill, man. I ain't gonna lie. I love my black pines. They're insane. I tell you, man, yeah, this is completely off topic. My black pines, I swear I've got some of the nicest black pines you can see. Mine are like jet
darker.
No, mine are like jet black. Like you see it, you see a lot of black pines with like heavy patterning, especially towards
brownish.
Especially like towards the tail. You see a lot of browns. Mine, there is no pattern to be seen.
Do they have iridescence being that dark?
They can, yeah. You got to get them. It's not like one of those you can put like, with a rainbow bow. You can put a fucking flashlight on those things and they'll light up.
But you get it out in the sunlight,
yeah,
see it and stuff. That's cool.
Get out in the sun, you can see it a little bit. It's definitely not as prominent, but yeah, man, they're cool. And mine are actually pretty chill, very food oriented, and they certainly don't enjoy my presence, but I can take them out and I won't bleed. Although I say that, I had one, I was doing water dishes and they're so food oriented. This thing came flying out the tub and actually grabbed me on my thigh, like grabbed the meat of my leg. And it was like holding on. I was like, you son of a bitch. Let go.
I bet you were excited it wasn't a little higher up though.
Yeah. I'm glad it was where it was, but I was like, you motherfucker.
Man, I got hit on the finger by one of the green trees the other day.
Oh no, dude,
that sucked.
It's the most common place to get bit, but like on your hands. It's like tattoos. Like tattoos on your hands and any of those bony places.
Thinner the skin, yeah.
Nope. Well, it's mostly like nerve endings. Like if you have a lot of nerves, which you have a ton of nerves in your fingers and your hands, man, like, God, that's nope.
I had a spot in my thumb just recently. This was just this week, but it was getting real puffy and painful. And I'd gotten a real small bite. It was one of those where a snake missed the rat, and it's like as soon as it realized that it had nipped my finger, it immediately pulled back, but it must have pulled a tooth out because my thumb was looking a little infected and stuff. So I cut it open and squeezed. I actually popped the tooth out at work the other day, right out of the wound.
I did the same thing. This was a couple years ago. I had a carpet that was like one of my nicest carpets in the collection. She was really sweet. But she had like a slide. It was a tub with a python portal in it. And so I had sliding glass, and I thought she would be okay. And I slid that glass open. She came out and just tagged me right on the thumb, and it hurt so bad because it was a food response. She didn't grab and wrap, but it was a big thump. And a couple days later, like my thumb just was hurting. I could feel almost this little raised spot in it. And so I popped that sucker like a zit, and this tooth just came flying out.
Like a splinter.
Like I think I got two teeth out of the same spot, and it was popping a zit, dude. It was.
But it let go right away.
Yeah. No,
I bet it pulled the teeth out when it released a little bit. Mm-hmm. We talked about the rosies earlier, and that is one thing that when they bite you, a lot of times it's hard to get them to let go. You have to just wait them out. It could be 10, 15 minutes before it decides to release you.
Yeah. No, that's the one thing about the Rosie I had, man. Like I was holding her, just checking her out, and she just kind of like went around my wrist. All of a sudden she stopped and then just kind of sat there. All of a sudden picked her nose up and like turned her head. I was like, don't
do that little push.
Yeah,
then
did that push and then just grabbed on and wrapped my wrist, and I was like, really? Like, this isn't. I get it when there's rodents in the room or it's a feeding incident, whatever. But like, I was just holding her for funsies. No.
Well, was it maybe it likes pinkies? Did it bite you on the pinky finger?
Oh no, it was like on my. It wasn't even like a digit. It was like on my wrist, like randomly over here. And I'm like, really, dude? Like that's what we're doing. It's they're fun though, man. Rosie's.
What locality was it?
I have no idea. This was so long ago, and the person I was with at the time had just, she bought it kind of randomly because she always wanted a Rosie boa, and so I was taking care of it. And it was. I tell you the weirdest thing. So since you work with them a lot, do you do like you give them water for certain days of the week?
No, I'm not that strict about it, but I do. I will pull their water when I'm feeding, and I wait a couple of days to put it back. If they drink water and they eat too close together, and it's not all of them, and it's not even like it's more deserts than coastals or anything. It's just randomly you'll get some that'll regurge.
Yeah.
When they drink and eat too close together, and they seem to have sensitive digestive systems compared to some of the other snakes I keep. So if you have a Rosie that regurges, it can be very difficult to get it back eating normally. So you really want to do everything in your power to prevent it. And that's one of the really simple things I can do is just take that water out, feed them, then wait a couple days and put it back in.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking. Cause like the issue that we had with her was, I didn't know anything about him. Like I didn't buy it, but she bought it, and it was like one of those didn't know anything about it, but liked Rosie boas, so we got one, and had water in 24/7, but she kept regurgitating her food, and then we started just keeping her water because we read about it, and we started keeping her water dish in there like basically 3 days a week. We'd feed, leave the water dish out for a few days, put it in for 3 days. Feed her, pull it,
and she did great after that.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
like no issues. And it was the weirdest thing. Like I've never dealt with another snake that needed something like that. But
that's probably the biggest argument that I see in Rosie groups is people will argue that point back and forth. And I've had a lot of Rosies, and I still have a lot, and it's like every animal is an individual, right? So it seems like a silly thing to fight over. Like you'll always get those people that say, I keep 24/7, I have no problems. And it's like, well, cool. You got lucky. You got a good one. If this guy's having a problem and it can fix the problem, do it,
Yeah. It's like maybe some just like don't engorge on water every second they get. And the reasoning we heard or that we read behind it was because where they're from, they don't have access to water like that. So when they have access to water, they gorge on it, and it becomes too much, and because they don't know when they're going to get it again.
Exactly. And so if their system is full and they can't fit a prey item in there, of course they're going to regurgitate it,
Right. Exactly.
And they're opportunistic feeders. I mean, Rosies do not refuse food. And like,
God no.
BCIs like that, right? Boa Imperator, they're going to be the same way where you can feed them to their own detriment. Most of those, like, so people complain about certain snakes that will go off feed certain times of the year or, this kind of thing. And really, I think some snakes just know that they don't need it,
Yeah,
I do. I give almost everything I have, whether it's being brumated or not, gets a seasonal feeding as well as a slight temperature drop, sometimes an extreme temperature drop. And I think it's beneficial, to all of them.
Sure. For sure.
And it's really easy to get some snakes obese, and it's just going to shorten their lifespan. So
I think BCIs and I think just boa constrictors in general, like true boas, they, in my opinion, are the most commonly obese snakes I see. At least between carpets and true boas, like, yeah, dude, I've seen so many fat boas. Like, man, I know true red tails will get big, but I've seen some 12, 13-foot animals that just look like giant slugs. And I'm
because
like,
they need to get big slow first. Yeah, that's the thing is, and I think our mindset and our understanding has changed quite a bit in that, because I know when I was younger and everything that I could find and any advice I was given was really to give it the biggest meal you could, like once a week. So, I mean, my big snakes early on, my bigger boas, I was given those colossal rats that you could get from the Road and Rose play. They're huge, you know, and I remember having an issue with what they call them, Zucker rats, that are the big fatty ones.
Yeah.
You know, a boa really doesn't ever need a rat that big, or if you are giving it a big meal, it really needs a big break. But you know, it was kind of like that idea that you know, if you fed Saturday last week, you're going to feed Saturday next week and Saturday the next, and it's going to be the biggest rat you can get. And so I think our understanding is changing with that.
Absolutely.
Or you know, and part of that may have been the desire to breed fast. We still see that with ball pythons and people that want to get the next morph. That's one reason I think that I can't bring myself to feed a ball python with the schedule you hear some ball python people feeding. I feed them like my boas. I give them probably, you know, some people say they never go above like a medium or a small rat. I'll still give a large meal, but I'm not going to feed it again for 3 or 4 weeks. You know, and that seems to work really well for my boas too. And they grow fine. They have good muscle tone. And I don't know if you guys has read Vin Russo's book, The Complete Boa Constrictor, or now the new one, The More Complete. But he's got a little blurb in part of that there where Eugene Bissett told him years ago, and I'm paraphrasing here, but something to the effect of boas grow better when you don't feed them. And as odd as that sounds, it seems to be true, because when I was younger and I was feeding heavier, they would have big, really soft poops. You know, their stools were just runny and big. And so now that I feed less frequently, it's like they're absorbing and utilizing those nutrients better because they're smaller, firmer, you know, obviously more healthy. And then you're not getting these big, fat, overweight snakes. And, you know, some of my early boas were only living, you know, 5-6 years old. And I suspect because I was probably feeding them to death, you know, they were getting so fat that their body couldn't handle it. Where, well, I actually have a Sonoran boa in the other room right now that she's 19. I think she'll be 19 this year.
Wow.
And, you know, and she's doing great, but same thing. She doesn't eat a lot.
And I think that it's funny you bring that up. That was going to be my next point. I 100% believe that's why a lot of people say, yeah, all my snakes pretty much live 10 years max and they're done. I'm like, what's your feeding schedule like, dude? Like, and that's another thing of like, how fast did you get it up to breeding size? You know, because like it's not really natural to get any snake up to breeding size in 2 or 3 years.
Right.
You know?
And of course, with this conversation, you know, people also have to keep in mind what type of snake they have, because very active snakes that are going out and actively hunting their food, they need to eat more often.
Crebos, you know, false water cobras.
They're great examples where, but you know, ambush predators that are really sitting and waiting, and they're not having that they're not having the same amount of activity to digest.
Metabolism is non-existent.
Right. Yeah. So they need time to let that break down. And then I'm sure you guys have heard, you know, the study or read it, the one I think it focused on Burmese pythons, but it had to do with the fact that these large constrictors, their blood's getting really thick with plasma as they're digesting, and their organs are in some cases doubling inside, the stomach, the heart, you know, a lot of this stuff. And it's really so that they can break down that prey item and digest everything. So part of my thought after reading that was, well, if you're feeding your boa weekly, and it really takes 2 weeks for that process to go back to normal, you're always ramping this thing up to 200%, you know, and
it's always in a constant state of digestion.
Yep. And like, so that fasting period, let it get to normal. And that's one reason I do like to do larger meals less frequently, because the way I understood it anyway, and I could be wrong, was that process is happening no matter what size meal it's getting. So if that's the case, I'd rather give it a bigger meal and a longer break, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Or if you are doing small meals, maybe do multiple small meals over a week time, then still give it that 3-4 week period in between, you know?
Yeah. For my, you know, my colubrids, I feed smaller stuff semi more often because they have a faster digestive system. But with the carpets, like, an average adult carpet in my house gets a medium rat every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks at most.
Every
But
4 days.
it's normally like 3 to 4 weeks. But if I give them a large rat, which they can absolutely take, if I give them a big old rat, it's going to be a month and a half before I give them another item,
Yeah.
But like, granted, yeah, they're out there looking every time I've got food in the room, but it's like, I'm not going to do that, man. Like, I've got a carpet in here she's a 2012, so she's going on 13 years old, and she's in very good health, like no issues. And it just breaks my heart when, in my opinion, if a snake doesn't live to at least 15, I'm not happy. Like, obviously other things can happen, but if it's a healthy snake, 15 years old is like my absolute minimum for me to be, I did this snake right. If it's dying at 8 to 6, 8, even 10 years old, I'm like, okay, I did something wrong. Of course, unless, we talked about, before, there's cancerous problems that these things can have, internal issues. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. But if you're consistently, all your snakes are dying at 10 years old or younger, depending on the species, then, maybe take a look at your feeding regimen.
My oldest snakes will be 31 this year. So they were born in 1994.
Awesome.
Rubber boas. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. That's so sick.
Yeah, it's cool. But nobody really knows how old rubber boas can live. I mean, there's some suspicions that they might, get close to 100 or more. Wow. Which is just crazy to think about. But look how dormant they are for long periods of the long times of the year, So it's crazy to think about, because I don't know, you can't imagine reptiles living that long. But I mean, look at crocodiles.
Yeah.
Now those are huge. So why couldn't a small snake,
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense under proper conditions, man. Like, no, why not?
Yeah.
Like, there's records of ball pythons getting into the 40s.
There was that one at the St. Louis Zoo that laid eggs, and it hadn't been with a male in whatever it was, 15 years.
Yeah,
but that one, I believe, was in captivity for more than 40 years. And it was a large adult when they got it. So it could have been up to 60,
Yeah. Like, it's
crazy.
It just makes you think, like,
but I bet you they were feeding it sparingly too.
Yeah.
Being a display animal as opposed to a breeder, I bet it wasn't eaten weekly.
100%. That's my biggest thing, man. Like, none of my stuff grows fast. Nothing in my room grows fast. Nothing in my room is skinny, but nothing here grows stupid fast. Even like rat snakes, my minimum is 4 years old for possible breeding. But for most stuff, I'm shooting for 5, even 6 years old. Like,
that's cool. Did you guys ever listen to the Herp Nation when they had? I don't even think you can find them anymore, but there's the Herp Nation podcasts, and there was different hosts and things. But Vin Russo had a couple of talks
the best episodes.
There was 2 in particular from Vin Russo that really kind of changed my idea about how I wanted to feed. And I bet you're thinking of the same one with Scott Boback and was it the Calker K's or the Crawl K's? But he'd been out there, whatever it was, like 8 years. And, they think these boas were only eating twice a year during bird migrations when they went and when they came back, The other one was he had Warren Booth on there, and they were discussing how they seasonally feed and how they give a winter break and things. And just a lot of what they said made a lot of sense to me. And that really, made me want to learn more about it, but also try it with my own animals. And it really seems to have made a difference.
Yeah. I'm telling you, man, like, there's just looking at your stuff. If snakes aren't really meant to be squishy, at least most snakes. Like, you feel my carpet pythons, they're stout, they're hard, they're strong. I have felt so many carpet pythons, whenever you feel them, they're literally spongy. And it's like, dude, I'm not saying all snakes, everything's different, but like, most snakes aren't meant to be squishy.
It's probably the fat stores you're
Exactly.
feeling there. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, you want your snake to be strong and toned, not fat and mushy. Like,
Right.
I don't know, man. I got that feeding is one of my biggest pet peeves in the reptile hobby, and it's
Well, and I think, like I said, I think our understanding is really changing with that stuff, and that's a
absolutely
big part of it. Because I mean, like I said, I used to do what I thought I was doing right, and it's been said multiple times, but from a human perspective, if a snake is consistently eating, it makes you think that you're a good keeper and you're doing things right. So it's like almost our little reward is like, oh, we're a perfect keeper because it's always wanting to eat. But yeah. So I think things are changing. People are understanding better. And
yeah, absolutely. It's definitely going in the right direction. That's for sure. But you still see your 14-foot
on those corn snake groups, man. Those corn snake groups, you see some morbidly obese animals.
Oh, dude, corn snakes are a horrible
it's funny because they're such a slender one to begin with. I mean, they look like they're made to be slender,
Oh, dude, but you'll see
they're talking about how someone's cage is too small and not up to par. Post pictures of their animals, and their animals look like they could have a freaking cardiac episode at any moment.
You'll see corn snakes that are 6 foot long, damn near the size of a Coke can, and you're like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Damn. Are those native where you guys are at?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's one I've never seen in the wild.
The Mecca,
dude. Biggest corn snake I've ever seen in the wild was maybe 4 foot. Like, they're
that one we found that one night cruising was probably one of the bigger ones I've seen.
Yeah, that was that one.
They're slender though.
Yeah, no, they're like none of my stuff eats anything bigger than a extra large mouse. Like, and that leaves a lump, like, and that would be the same thing for anything we found, in the wild. Like, I'm telling you, the biggest corn I've ever seen was.
I've never seen an obese snake in the wild.
No,
ever.
My kids were riding bikes right down our street one time, and they came running to get me because they found a big bull snake. And so we took I held it. They stood in front of me, and we took a picture. And I'm just under 6 foot, but I had this thing its head up by my head, and it went down to the ground, and then the tail coiled on the ground. So it was at minimum 6.5 feet, and it was probably about as big around as a 50-cent piece.
Oh yeah, man,
and as big as it was. But
yeah,
we don't have a whole lot of snakes in this part of Colorado. I think there's just under 30 in Colorado all told, but what we mainly find is bull snakes and a lot of garter snakes. They're all over our house in the summertime. I think, in fact, the what is it? The kids' record is like 13 or 14 that they've caught in a day right in our own yard here. And then we'll find yellow belly racers every summer too. But
oh, those are cool.
In fact, last summer, so what we do is we have extra buckets out, and so if I'm getting ready to mow, the kids will go ahead in front of me and they'll find any garter snakes or any snakes they find. They'll put them in these buckets. Like I said, it's usually garters, and so I had caught one. Turned out it was female. I put it in a bucket. We put a lid on, and then we had 2 other buckets, and so my middle son was putting medium-sized ones in this one. We had the larger one in a bucket, and he was putting babies in a third bucket. So I'm mowing, and he's waving at me, trying to get my attention. So I turn the mower off, and he says, "Why'd you put a baby in with the big snake? I got this other bucket for the babies." I said, "I didn't put a baby in there." He goes, "Yeah, there's a little one in with the big one, but I want the little ones in this one." So what are you talking about? We go and open it. And that thing ended up having 7 babies in the bucket. It was the coolest thing.
That's awesome, man. That's super sick. Well, we ready to about wrap this one up, fellas? We're hitting the 2.5 hour.
Yeah, I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on, man. I'm glad we finally were able to make it happen.
Yeah.
We'll have to have a Epicrates bonanza at some point.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, we didn't touch a ton on those or even any of the locality boas and stuff.
Yeah, we kind of went off on a lot of tangents in this one.
But I tend to do that. I apologize.
Oh, we do the same thing, brother.
That's why we keep the outline short.
Yeah.
Right.
We know what's going to happen.
Because you might not follow it anyway.
Yeah. We're definitely going to have a follow-up on some of the locality, like boa constrictors. And yeah, for sure.
Cool.
If people want to get a hold of you for whatever reason, what's the best way forward?
The best way is social media. I only have Facebook really. So Top Line Constrictors on Facebook. And then you could also email me at toplineconstrictors@gmail.com.
Cool. Awesome.
This episode, as always, brought to you by BlackBoxCages.com. Racks, cages. You need both. You need one. You need the other. Doesn't matter. They got it. Use the code THN24 or THN25 at checkout. Get a little something off. Save even more. Choose the pickup option instead of shipping. If you're within a reasonable distance of Atlanta, or hey, you want to drive cross country, go nuts. The option is there. And then fullvisapparel.com. That code is also THN. Get you 15% off your order. It's the exclusive promo code for THN listeners and viewers like you. And Steve Snaketuary and the Venom Hot Sauce. Get that whole lineup. SteveSnaketuary.com. Collect the whole set. You won't be disappointed. We will be back for Snakes and Stogies on Monday. Are y'all doing Flippin' 10 next week?
Yeah. So we've got 3 like absolute heater guests lined up. As far as who we're having on next week, I'm not sure yet. But I think we are going to change to start announcing some of our guests, because we are going to be having some bigger name people on, and we do want people to be prepared and ready if they want to tune in for the live. So I think we're going to stop hiding who we're going to have on.
That would be great.
Yeah. So,
but
yeah,
he doesn't tell me, just so everyone knows. Like, I know as much as everyone else does. He doesn't tell me who these guests are until the show is happening. So.
No, that was always a big thing for us. And that was only because we didn't want people to tune in because of the guests we had. We wanted people to tune in because they love herping. But I'm starting to realize it's not necessarily the best way to go about things, because some people may want to tune in for a live to ask questions to a certain guest, and blah blah blah. So I think we're going to stop kind of hiding. It's not going to be like a week before, because some of these guys are very busy. So it's going to be one of those day before. We'll do an announcement as long as we have the official go. But we have some pretty big name people lined up, and I'm very, very excited, to say the least. So definitely stay tuned. But either way, we will be recording come hell or high water Flippin' 10 next week. We're getting back on our weekly schedule. So if you like field herping, you want to come hang out for a live show, come hang out with us during Flippin' 10 every other Thursday. But then, of course, they will be on the podcast platform. But definitely check that out if you haven't.
Rack Nerds is happening next week, too.
Nice.
Serg's been knocking it out of the park, man, with the scheduling and the sort of lining people up. And I think Phil is actually supposed to play third wheel this coming week, just because we want his input. We wanted him in on this episode as well. It'll be good.
Sweet.
Looking forward to it. So thank you, everybody. We will see you later.
Bye.
Later.
Oh, come on, mouse. There we go.
Do you want me to end?